Podcasting live from across the United States, this is the Multitapped Podcast.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 9 of the Multitapped Podcast, Not So Final Fantasy. And tonight we're going to be discussing, of course, Final Fantasy. What a shocker, right? I know this is one we briefly touched on in our RPG podcast way back in Season 1, but this is a topic that a lot of people in the group wanted to talk about, and there's a bunch to talk about. So we're coming back and doing it new school. Joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Jay Dubious.
Hello.
As well as Mr. Mike Tendo.
What up?
And, of course, the classic himself, Mr. Avalanche Jared. So, for those of you watching who might not have played a Final Fantasy game, though I imagine that's probably fucking impossible at this point, here's a quick breakdown of the history of it. So, Final Fantasy is one of the most well-known and, ironically, longest-running RPG franchises ever released. It all started as the brainchild of Hironobu Sakaguchi as his last-ditch effort to stay in the gaming industry, which is why a lot of people think it's called Final Fantasy II. After its incredibly well-received launch in 1987, the franchise went on to become so popular that it not only set what many see to be as the standard for console RPGs, but has also had a lot of spin-offs across other gaming genres too. So that's the quick and simple breakdown. And for the opening question tonight, this is a pretty easy one. I want to know what everybody's exposure, like what the first Final Fantasy you saw was. Because I think this is going to be a little different for me, because personally it was Final Fantasy VII. And I know that you guys had the NES and the Super Nintendo, and that's what you grew up with. But like I've said in other episodes, the PS1 was my first console. So like I have very vivid memories of going over to my neighbor's house who also had a PS1, and Cosmo Canyon was the first section of the game I ever saw. And for the record, to this day is still one of my favorite sections of the game. I like how it's paced and stars spooky ghosts and shit like that. Cool, I'm down. All right. I'm into it, you know what I mean? So that was my real first exposure to it as terms of games. But I think the first time I ever saw a Final Fantasy character was actually in, and I'm going to butcher this because I don't know how to say it. I know it's German or whatever, but Ehrgeise or whatever. That fucking... Yeah, Ehrgeise. That fucking fighting game. I saw Cloud. That was the first one I played. It's from that Final Fantasy game people talk about. But yeah, that was the first time I saw a character.
That's really
but yeah,
weird.
Yeah, it was strange. You have to. It was all weird for me because the next one I remember playing that had Final Fantasy was Chocobo Racing, and that's a whole other fucking.
Yeah.
Like that game was sick. First off. For the record, this is a hell of a kart racer. But that was like, yeah, that's like my initial exposure to Final Fantasy was that
you
shit.
just made me so happy. You're like the second person I've ever talked to who liked Chocobo Racing.
That game's sick. Are you kidding me?
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. I generally speaking am a fan of a lot of those old kart racers. I like Crash Team Racing too. That game was really good. But yeah. I like Chocobo Racing. That was a really solid game. I really like the art style too, like the sprites on the airship and shit like that. It was game. It was good shit. But yeah, so that was my first exposure to the series. I didn't have any of the old school stuff. That wasn't me. So I'm a little curious about you guys.
My first experience with it was not even playing a Final Fantasy game, but I remembered we have a lot of family like in the Georgia, Alabama Bible Belt area. And we'd always visit them, and I had this one cousin who was like obsessed with RPGs and the Super Nintendo specifically. And me and my brother would go to his house, and he wouldn't let us play any of his Final Fantasy games, but we would watch him play, like, say, Final Fantasy. I think it was 4. Yeah, it was Final Fantasy 4. And what he would do to like placate us, because we were real young, is he would name one of his party members after us, and then when it would come time for their turn, he would let us decide to attack or magic.
Oh, neat.
And that's the first time I ever saw it, and the first time I ever put my hands on a Final Fantasy game was 6.
That's cool. Honestly, and I know this might ruin, the genuine wholesomeness of that story, but you could make that into a pretty decent drinking game, I think. But that's a whole nother thing. That's cool. I've never heard of anybody incorporating other people in a room into an RPG like that, like couch play. That's kind of neat because there are lots of times where, and even Lucius Showcase right now, he's playing through Darkest Dungeon, and he named all the people after Multitapped members. So, it's always been a fun thing to do.
The worst things in the world happened to that fucking party.
Yeah, dude, I was the first to go too, and apparently I was carrying him. Oh, horrible. And then Rewind Mike died after not letting anyone healing him and then complaining about not getting healed, which...
That sounds like Rewind Mike.
Yeah, I don't know how that game pegs people. It made me laugh. Shit, my favorite playthrough of Pokemon was when I did Sun, and I named it the Dolly Popka and named every Pokemon after Xbox games. They're the ones in my main party. But yeah, awesome. That's cool. What about you, Dubious?
The first one I played actually was Mystic Quest.
Really?
Yeah, and I hated it. Like, I rented it, and I was like, oh, this looks like it might be cool. Like, you gotta, back when I was a kid, I refused to play the Zelda games because I didn't like the plain gold covers. So I just never gave it a chance. And so, Final Fantasy 2 and 3 also had, really boring covers, so I never played those either. But then, I rented Mystic Quest, hated it. And then after that, I played Final Fantasy 6 a little bit, but didn't really get into it until after I beat Chrono Trigger, and that got me really into the RPG genre and able to understand this is the way these games are played.
That's cool though. I know it's not a Final Fantasy game, but fuck, I love Chrono Trigger, man. That's what really got me replaying a lot of the old ones. When I bought my Super Nintendo originally, it was just okay, fine, this game's fucking fantastic. I'll go start buying Super Nintendo
RPGs.
RPGs.
Is it spoils you to the point where you can't play another RPG for a month or two after you beat Chrono Trigger, I feel like.
This is true. And also, I will go ahead and mention it right now since I'm sure it'll come up later and Chad will get furious about it when it happens anyways. But I have not first-handedly played any of the Final Fantasies pre-7. I have seen people play them. I've watched Let's Plays. I'm not an idiot. I've played all the spin-offs, Dissident. I know all the people played Chrono Trigger. I know fucking Kefka is. Don't give me that shit. But I have not personally played them, so my knowledge will be a little bit limited there. So apologies in advance. But what about you, Mr. Tendo?
This guy.
This fucking guy.
So... yeah, my very first... I don't really consider Zelda a full-on JRPG. I mean, it's more action RPG than anything. But my first, full-on JRPG was Chrono Trigger. And I was just... as you said, I love that game. It was one of those games... I got it in 7th grade when it came out and just, went back to it and beat it over and over and over again to get the different endings and everything. And that's really what kind of hooked me into RPGs. And the big problem is I have the worst attention span. So all the games that I review and all the games that I play mostly are action adventures or action RPGs or something where it's not just a full on 80-hour romp. So Final Fantasy VII was the first Final Fantasy game in the series that I actually played, and that was just because I got a PlayStation 1 and I was like, all right, well, I've heard this Final Fantasy VII game is amazing, and so I picked it up. Actually, I rented it, which was the worst possible thing you could do, is rent a 40 plus hour game.
I beat Earthbound by renting it.
That's
wow.
Crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, so I rented it, and as soon as I got done renting it, I was like, all right, well, I got to go buy this, so I did, and it's been a part of my game series that I enjoy ever since then. So,
I'll be honest too. Final Fantasy, more than any other system, makes me regret not keeping my old games as a kid and giving them to my sister and selling some of shit. Because when I was a kid, every year at Christmas, my grandparents on my mother's side would send me the new Final Fantasy game that came out. Because after I played 7 and all the other ones, I'm like, these are sick. So it was oh man, Final Fantasy 8, and then I played it and got really sad and disappointed, and then oh sweet, Final Fantasy 9, played it and was like, why don't people like this game? This is really good. And then PS2 and all that shit. But we'll get into it when we touch the game specifically, which we might as well now, especially because very similar to the Persona, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the older games. Kind of pitch them to me, because even though I haven't sat down and personally played them, I do own 1 and 2 for the Famicom, and I do own Final Fantasy 6 or 3 on the Super Nintendo. And I've made sure the save works and everything on it, so I do plan on sitting that one down. I just haven't been in the mood to read a book. So I've been, waiting to touch that one. But let's start with Final Fantasy 1, because who here has actually played it?
I have.
Briefly, like really brief.
It's
Most
like-
of my experience with all the pre-7 games, other than I'd say 6 and 5, were very limited.
Okay, so we're mainly looking at Dubes and Jared here. What are thoughts on it? Besides that, it's incredibly simple, because the little bit I've played and seen, it was the first one. It makes sense, you know what I mean? But 4 heroes, 1 villain, some time travel, pretty simple shit. But it really got it going, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it did. Man, I'm of two minds with the first and the second game. On one hand, I played it after being really familiar with the series.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did, it's so quaint that you almost have to love it, because all the shit you love about Final Fantasy, it's there, just like, not as polished and not as good, the music is there, the feeling of it, obviously I didn't feel it at the time when I first played it, but this was like the first JRPG to have the Dragon Quest style battle system, but you could see both party members and enemies on screen at once, which at the time that was insanely revolutionary. But I don't know, man, it's kind of cool. On the other hand, you have it's almost unplayable if you are used to modern RPGs. It is on the borderline of unplayable, and there's a lot of game-breaking stuff in the actual original.
It is pretty filled with bugs. Like it's insane. I was looking at the differences between like the NES version and the like re-releases, and holy shit, there are like stats in that game that just don't do anything.
Yeah, there's stats
like
that
you
don't
can
do anything,
level
there's spells that don't do anything.
Yeah, like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it's kind of insane when you think about it, just because, like, the game's good, it is RPG, but, like, it's just, like, due to the time, and, it was, like, the real first, like, one of the first big, like, console RPGs, you know what I mean? Fucking, it's just really funny to think that that's what took off. People are like, oh, I'll figure out what this stat does eventually, maybe.
I mean, when you compare it to, like, Dragon
nothing?
Warrior 1, it's, like, incredible, I thought. And Dragon Warrior 1
Yeah,
is completely unplayable at this point. Unless you're
also
super Derek and insane, but the problem I have with the first Final Fantasy, I've like tried to play it a bunch of times because I've really made an effort to try and play basically every game Square's released, and I'm still trying to do that, but it's definitely a where do I go, what the fuck do I do kind of a game. Like, even in that first area, like, it doesn't really, like, you can talk to people, you kind of know what you're supposed to do, but, like, it's really hard to figure out where you're supposed to go, like, initially.
For sure.
I mean, that's also not just Final Fantasy's fault. I feel like a lot of the games, at least like RPG and adventure games back then, kind of had that problem. I know that's how I fucking felt the first time I ever touched Zelda. I was like, what the fuck is this? Where am I supposed to, I guess, into the cave? Hey, this game's designed well. Okay, that makes sense. But I don't know. A lot of games I feel from that era, I just get totally fucking lost, and I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah, even non-RPGs, anything basically that's non-linear, forget it. I mean, unless you're playing like, something simple like Kirby or Mario or those types of games, then you've got a point A to point B sort of scenario. Whereas, you're talking your Castlevania 2s, which are action or RPG styles.
Yeah.
You're talking your Zeldas, which is your top-down, action RPG style. I mean, pretty much any game that you were playing back then that wasn't linear was like, where do I go? A lot of stuff just wasn't intuitive back then.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of that just has to do with when it came in, the video game design timeline, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to knock a lot of that early shit for, like, weird design stuff, but it's still a good game, but I feel like it's like almost Final Fantasy distilled, you know what I mean? It's just so simple, and it's just so, like, that's it.
It's raw. It's really raw.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the blueprints. It's just very similar to like Mega Man, the first Mega Man. It's like this is the basis for what you'll eventually know as Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Very, very true. But let's move on to Final Fantasy 2 then. I'm dubious this is one you've played as well. I like.
I actually was this Japan only, or are we talking
No,
Final Fantasy
it was
2 on the Super Nintendo?
So Final Fantasy 2 was originally Japan only, but has since been released in like Final Fantasy bundles since then on like iOS
and like DS and stuff like that.
Yeah, handheld shit like that.
I actually haven't played
PSP.
this one.
I have, and I sort of think it sucks.
Well, okay, here's my thing, and you can give me some feedback on this too, Jared and chat. The only reason I know anything about 2 is because it's one of the few times that I find, or it's the first example I find of people being really into one of the villains, like as a character. Because holy shit, that guy, motherfucker dies and goes to hell and then dies and then like goes to heaven and I mean, it's fucking insane. You know what I mean? Like, to the best of my knowledge, and admittingly, this is mainly coming from like my sister, and I don't want to necessarily say it in case I'm remembering this wrong, but I swear I think even Jimmy said something one time. But like, it's a bigger game in Japan because of the villain.
Mm. That makes sense.
I don't know, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts too.
I don't know, man. They took a lot of the Final Fantasy games. This got a little less pronounced as the series went on, but typically the idea was, when you made a new Final Fantasy game, to just do something completely different, not to do a numbered sequel. Like, they changed up a lot of stuff between 1, 2, and 3. And I think it was because, at that time at Nintendo, or with Nintendo games, that's kind of what you did with Zelda 1 and 2 and Castlevania 2. Like, that's kind of how you did it. And I think they still keep that alive today. Like, there's, between 15 and 13, you couldn't draw a straight line. But I just think that they, I don't know, it's a little too different for me. I don't like the way things work, the whole keyword system. Super. When you have to talk to people and then bring up a keyword, and then once you bring up that keyword, they might give you another keyword. And like, that worked well enough in games like Shadowrun way later. But I don't know, it just didn't fit into that style of like top-down JRPG for me.
The magic system, I think, is what is strikingly strange to me in terms of gameplay. Instead of having, like, the Cure, Kira, that thing that we see in, like, every other fucking game, it's Cure 1, and then, like, you can go up to 16, isn't it, on the spells, I think, is the highest you can get them upgraded, something like that. So, it's really fucking weird.
1 second. Let's talk about this for a second. I think when Final Fantasy started getting terrible is when they stopped using Fire, Fire 2, Fire 3, and they started putting Firaga and all this other
Fire.
There. Keep everything simple. We all loved it. Nobody wanted some weird made-up words for Fire level 3.
What'd they do with it with 8, right? 8 was the start of that?
8 was the start.
Yeah.
That's what...
Can we just argue nomenclature for a second? I don't care how it functions. The fact that they stopped using numbers and started using made-up words bothers me. And hey, it's a valid argument, man. I can't fight it. That is 100% opinion, and there's no point to pick there. But yeah, outside of the fact that like the Emperor is a really like fan favorite villain and just some weird gameplay things, I don't really know anybody who talks about it much.
No, it's kind of like the lost Final Fantasy.
Yeah, the most interesting thing about 2, I think, is if you're going to play through it, play like the Wonder Swan remake, or that made it to, I think it was Final Fantasy Anthology, it made it onto.
The PSP had a port of 2, didn't it?
PSP had a port of 2 also.
Yeah.
So play it on one of the remakes, because the sprite art is actually kind of nice looking, and it's pretty cool to see Final Fantasy 2 updated like that. But they also did a lot to kind of tweak it, make it a little more user-friendly too.
Speaking of remakes or redos, not to jump too far ahead, but has anybody seen the retro rebirth of like Final Fantasy VI and like some of the other ones that they're doing on like iOS? Like the sprites look horrendous.
Oh, yeah.
They look awful. Like they look really super overly cutesy and terrible.
Smooth, just disgusting.
So some of the Steam versions do have those sprites too, and they look just
it's
awful.
Rough.
I just don't understand why you would mess with something like that. That is so well known for having amazing sprite art, and clearly does.
Or SquareSoft. Some of the best sprite artists that ever lived, came out of SquareSoft, and somehow they can't get some dude in middle school in their basement to do some fucking sprite art. I've played games on Steam with like 2 people involved in the creation that have better sprite art than that. Jesus, what are they doing?
It makes very little sense to me. Did we at all, just because I know that very few of us have a bunch of knowledge of these older games and even have played them, but did anybody want to talk about Final Fantasy 3 real quick? Because I know we're going to have a lot to talk about in 4.
Yeah, I never played 3 as a.
I played the DS version of it, the one like where they re-released it with like the 3D sprites or whatever. It was. Yeah. I mean, it's basically just a remake of the first one, right? That's kind of the thing.
Yeah, I think that they're very similar in like story structure and everything like that. I mean, the point is we want to talk about 4 because that was Final Fantasy 2 US, and then that was also the first game to feature, or at least I think this is interesting. It was the first game to feature active time, which became like a real fucking common thing in RPGs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm more into 4 than 3, so we could skip over 3.
There's nothing really else to say about 3.
Let's just get into 4. Speaking of forgotten Final Fantasy games, let's go ahead and move on to 4. Sorry, 3. Rest in peace.
4, aka 2, right?
Yeah, because that was this is where we see Square really start to do confusing shit with how they release Final Fantasy games. Because what was Final Fantasy 4 or 3 in Japan or 4 gets released as Final Fantasy 2 in North America. Yeah. Even with the show notes, I can't keep it straight because then 6 was 3 and like there's fucking like 13 2. I hate it so much. But yeah, Final Fantasy 4 in Japan released as 2 in America. This is 1991, right? And this is Super Nintendo, so this is when people are really starting to play it.
Yeah, I think 4 is when people jumped on board with the series and knew that this was like the way things were going from now on. I think this is the first Final Fantasy game to blow people away graphically. I mean, the Super Nintendo was doing some cool stuff back then, but just that starting scene on the airship and just how much attention to detail there was, and the sprites in battle were just so detailed and cool. I think that's when people started seeing that Final Fantasy was a good like commercial series because you could put those screenshots in a magazine and they look attractive, as still images and stuff. And I think that's when people really jumped onto it. Not as popular as a lot of the other retro Final Fantasy games, but that's when people really just started jumping on, I think.
Well, at the time, it was like the best looking game on the system, or like the best looking RPG on Super Nintendo.
Was great looking for its time, for sure.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to disagree, but at the same time, I just didn't play it when it came out, and actually, really, I still haven't really sat down and thoroughly played it. But I will say that when I had a Super Nintendo, which was around that time, like 91, 92, I was playing Zelda: Link to the Past. And so comparing Zelda: Link to the Past graphics to Final Fantasy 2, or 4 rather, just to me it was like night and day. I mean, Zelda was just hands down the most gorgeous game at the time.
True.
So it's like, yeah. So I mean, like if you compare those,
I forgot how early Link to the Past came. That was like a launch game, wasn't it?
Close. I think it came out maybe a year after, or maybe later on in the year for the system, because the system came out in what, 91? I believe, for Super Nintendo in the US. Right. Yeah, I believe it was 91, and in 90 it released in like Japan and everything. Yeah. So I believe it came out in early 91, and I remember getting Zelda: Link to the Past at launch. Like, it was the very first game I ever pre-ordered, and I mean, you could have been like, "Oh, you want to check out Final Fantasy 4?" and I would have been like, or Final Fantasy 2, I would have been like, no, I got Zelda. Are you kidding? So it was like, I don't know. Like, I would say the series didn't really grab me until 5, and that was like years later when like the Game Boy Advance port came out, because nobody had ever really played 5 except for the few that knew Japanese or imported the game, or they played it on the Final Fantasy. What's that Chronicles collection? Yeah. Or anthology?
Yeah.
The Chronicles or anthology, one of them.
Yep. That was the first time.
No, it was anthology.
No, yeah, because it was
Chronicles had Chrono Trigger and 2.
Right. So it was anthology because it had 5 and 6, because it came with a disc of music that had 5 and 6 on it. And I put the disc in first and completely fell in love with 5's soundtrack. So then I went back and started playing through 5, and I was like, I love 5. So
Man, those PlayStation versions though, those load times are fucking god.
Oh.
Dude.
Menus
Oh.
terrible.
Because I remember I bought Anthology because I was just like, dude, I'm finally gonna play 5. I'm stoked on this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like had a couple random battles load, and I was like, oh nope, this is trash.
Yeah, the fact that it loaded when you pulled up the menu was just like a death sentence to those types of games, especially Chrono Trigger, because I bought the Chronicles that had Chrono Trigger on it. So I was like, oh well,
Because it had the
screw it. I'll
cutscenes
just
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much why I bought it, for those
That's true,
cutscenes were amazing. But yeah, those load times killed it. So when they re-released it and redid it on the Game Boy Advance, it was like, oh, so good.
That Game Boy Advance version of Chrono Trigger is pretty dope.
I
Yeah.
would
Or the
Or
DS
I
version.
mean, yeah.
not to go on a slight tangent. I mean, it's Square. It's close enough, right? It's pretty much Final Fantasy. I do think that the DS port next to the original is the best like port that you can play because it's
For
got,
Chrono?
for Chrono Trigger because it's got all the cutscenes and all
I
that
have, I
shit.
have one small complaint with it, and it's the touchscreen icons in the menu on the bottom screen don't fit the look of Chrono Trigger. Like the artist who made them, it wasn't just in the same.
font. The font's definitely wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
but
I agree.
that's my main complaint with the game. So that means it's almost perfect.
Back on to Final Fantasy IV though.
Back
The
on
thing
Final
for
Fantasy.
me, and I know that Dubious mentioned that is it. In my head, it really kind of defines the way Final Fantasy looks. I remember that being the first game where, like, oh, this is what fucking black mages look like, white mages look like, you know what I mean? And it could be being North American and seeing it as Final Fantasy 2 and all that shit, you know what I mean? But, like, I don't know. A lot of that sprite work just kind of sticks with me.
Yeah.
It really rings in for setting the tone for the series.
It also told a really fucking cool story. Oh, I liked it a lot. It was just like a tale of redemption, and I don't know, man. Maybe it was just the age that I was, but for me at the time, nobody was telling stories like that in video games. So I don't know. 4 is just kill. I still love 4 to this day. It's kind of like a very unpolished version of 6. Like the mechanics and battles weren't as well rounded. And just things overall just seemed a little rough around the edges.
And the
And I kinda
sprite works good too, but like when you compare it to like the sprites in the 6, it's like, whoa, that's a huge step up to 6.
Yeah, but 6 is gorgeous. That game is
6 is
real pretty.
Mhm.
I think this laid the groundwork to how good 6 can be because it's a small cartridge too, so
Yeah.
not as much memory. It's cool.
It's funny because I know most of the characters from the 1 through 4 through later games that came out, like Dissidia, like a Dual DCM or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And so I remember unlocking all those characters and playing as those characters and being like, who are these characters? Like, I don't know anything about them. So then I would go back and learn about them. And I would say 4 probably had the most rich storyline of the first 4 games. All the first 3 games were very kind of like the hero has to save the day. The characters didn't really have that much personality to them.
Yeah, that's when they started changing things. I mean, man, there's so many cool characters in 4. It was insane.
Mhm.
And like the whole idea of, when Aerith dies in Final Fantasy 7, everybody was blown away. And I was playing Final
Spoilers.
Fantasy and left and right. It's insane. I mean, party members are just getting wiped out like flies, and I loved it. It was a really cool game. I liked it a lot. It added a lot of like sci-fi elements that I think would come to define the series too, because you're going to the moon and shit, and like
Yeah, Space Ghost.
Yeah, exactly. So I that's a lot of stuff that would come to like define the series, is that whole mix between medieval and futuristic, and I think it really got that start there.
It's crazy regarding death in Final Fantasy games, because it's like when that does happen in 7, you're just like, I've heard a lot of people were like, oh, I cried or whatever, and like I was watching it and I was kind of just like, this is really messed up. Like, I can't believe this is happening. But because I had played Chrono Trigger beforehand, I was like, oh well, she's gonna come back later, just like Chrono does. And so when she doesn't, you're just kind of like, but what about Aerith? Like, what? And so then I went on to play like later games like Valkyrie Profile, and there's just death everywhere. So it's like within the first 5 minutes, it's like one of the most like screwed up opening.
So depressing. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's such a depressing game. So it's like going from Final Fantasy 7 until a game like Valkyrie Profile, you just kind of get used to it. So you're like, oh, these characters are dead. Whatever.
Not to go on too small of a tangent, because I imagine we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the game, but I was in the camp of I didn't give a fuck when Eris died when I played Final Fantasy VII, because I just did not like her as a character. I thought her...
You are a liar, sir. That is not...
I'm being I'm 1,000% honest with you.
That only came to be after everybody fell in love with Eris. And
not at all, dude.
Tired of hearing about her.
You have to realize, okay, if you met my sister, you would probably understand, but from a very young age, I had hammered into my head, if they're not a strong, deep female lead, they're fucking worthless. So since she always felt, even when I was younger, as suffering from a bad case of life support syndrome, like, oh, I can't survive without the hero's help, I just did not give a shit. They killed her off, and I was like, cool. Next, like every other female character in that game offers so much more than Eris does, and I never cared.
It's such a rich backstory, and she was pretty much Final Fantasy Jesus. Come on, she died so the world could be saved.
I mean, to be fair though, I'm also the kind of person who did not like Renoa in Final Fantasy VIII either. I did not give a shit. So,
oh, you mean copycat, small-chested Tifa?
Yeah, it was just like.
She's a little more playful than Tifa was.
We'll get into this more when we get to the
we
PS1 games. Yeah. But no, Final Fantasy 4 to fucking good shit. Definitely check it out. Did we want to talk about 5 or did we want to get into 6?
Yeah, we definitely want to talk about 5.
Let's get into 5. Lay it on me.
5's awesome. It's insane. It's so good. It's crazy. I think this is the first time where you saw that class system come into play, that classic Final Fantasy class system. And to this day,
the job system, technically.
Job system. Other than Final Fantasy Tactics, this is probably the best it's been implemented. It's just damn near perfect. It's so good.
Tactics is what made me want to play this game. Just because, man, the job system was so, like, I got really into Tactics when that was out. Like, maybe even more so than 7. Like, I played through 7. It was great. But, like, Tactics, like, the way you can, like, hone every character is just incredible. And that's why I've always wanted to play 5, and I actually bought a fan translated repro of it right before I moved to California and left my Super Nintendo in Colorado.
Ooh, wrecked. Go and buy your mom's house tomorrow, son.
I love 5. It's really good. Like I said before, I fell in love with the soundtrack first, then started playing the game, and just really enjoyed it. I mean, I remember also playing a translated ROM of it on emulation back in like college, and then when the Game Boy Advance version came out, I just switched to that. It was I think I also picked up the strategy guide for it too, and I still have it. So it's like one of the few Final Fantasy games that I've had, like other than 7, that I've always had in my collection, and I've never gotten rid of it. So it's like, I don't know. It's I want to go back and finish it. I got really far in it, but I never actually finished it. But the characters are great. I mean, that is the key for me, is like you really fall in love with these characters. Like, they're really well written, and the story is refreshing. It's different, and the job systems are, as you said, like fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's great overall. And just like Final Fantasy Tactics, a lot of times I found with me playing through wasn't so much to like continue the story, but I was like grinding for job points so that I could like, perfect my characters like you were talking about. You would have like, I would level up like Ferris as a Lancer and then have her use magic and then use that Lance ability to gain MP from the enemies and stuff. Like, it was exactly like Tactics, where you were just grinding the entire time for fun, which is a weird concept.
Ferris was one of the first characters too, where it was like you didn't really know what she was. Like, you assumed that Ferris was a guy, and then when you find out she's a girl, you're like, oh, cool. And it's like one of those things where it's like a strong female lead that didn't need to be overly feminine, didn't need to be
infinitely
overly
better
masculine.
than Eris. Just saying.
Mad hate.
Man, I want to play this one so bad, but I'm actually looking at the Steam page for it, and it's got the trash sprites, unfortunately. For the PC version.
I think the PlayStation Virtual Console version might not. I'm gonna check it tonight for what it's worth.
It's got the load times though, so you got to find a version. So I guess playing it like fans translated through an emulator would be my best bet, maybe.
think Game Boy Advance is probably your best bet. I don't think it's still. Yeah, I mean, if you have that and a GameCube Game Boy player, that's probably your best bet.
I will say, this is such a fucking snobby thing to say, with the Game Boy Advance ports of 5 and 6, the font just looks dumb to me. It might sound like a geek in this stream. I feel like I'm a little bit of a snob.
No, I agree with the fonts. Like all the DS versions too all have fucked up fonts.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you grew up with the Super Nintendo fonts, like you have a certain expectation for the fonts, and so when you see them on Game Boy Advance and the DS, you're kind of like, there's something wrong about that, Yeah. But you could pick up the game. I just looked it up. You could pick up the game for less than $20, like loose, on the Game Boy Advance. So
that's it.
Also,
if you could deal with the
I also have
crappy
I have a Raspberry Pi too, so I can just play it on my TV using that.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of really cool fan translations for that kind of restore little stuff that was taken out of the translated version.
On what version?
Just fan translations that people.
Oh yeah.
Because the difficulty was tweaked a little bit for the American release, if I remember correctly.
It's definitely a game that I need to get a port of, and I'm looking at it, and it's crazy how many versions have been re-released digitally, too. Like, it looks like there are 2 different versions for the Wii U Virtual Console, depending on what region you're living in. Like, who the fuck, man? Like, I don't even know, but it sounds like the one I need to pick up is the GBA version. Because, I mean, to be fair, you guys are the first people I've talked to who have actually played it. Like, outside of the job system, I don't personally know anybody who's touched it. So it really makes me want to get into it, especially just because I've always liked that. I've always enjoyed AP systems. I think it's fun to kind of mess with your characters. And also, when I think of Final Fantasy, a lot of those jobs, and this is, once again, something we'll get into in the PS1 era because it's a lot of my argument for Final Fantasy IX. I really like the job fantasy. I like the way, like, Dragoons feel, you know what I mean? I really enjoy fucking blue mages, you know what I mean? Like, I like that from a gameplay aspect. It really drives me and motivates me to not only play, but even grind, which is generally, you can argue, the shittiest part of any RPG experience. You know what I mean? So, I think that face. Oh, you love the grind, Jared? I'm sorry. Did I offend you?
I'm actually editing a video right now. As soon as we get done, I'm gonna get back to it where I talk about that, and I think your average level of grinding in an RPG is super fun. But I'm one of those weirdos that has a good time playing bullet hell games. So I might just enjoy going into a trance-like state and have my eyes roll back in my head and do repetitive tasks over and over again.
It wouldn't be the weirdest thing I've heard you be into, so I guess that's fair enough. I'll have to check out the video when it finishes up.
I don't know. I mean, regarding grinding, I kind of feel like if the grinding is not going anywhere and if the leveling is taking way too long to happen, then I kind of lose interest. And especially if the battle system isn't fun too. And 5 specifically has a great battle system, so I think that it's definitely worth grinding your way through. Plus, you get different abilities and stuff, and all the characters have when they go through the different jobs, they have different costumes too, which I really love.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I put 76 hours into that game, and it was mostly just grind to perfect my characters. It was super fun. Really good game.
Mm-hmm.
I just I agree. I think grinding's good when you feel like you're being rewarded, when it's not just a mindless slog where you're not fucking doing anything.
Gross.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's the same reason that I like blue mages. I like the running around and hitting every enemy type and seeing what spells you can learn and all that shit. You know what I mean? Like it's enjoyable to me. It's good stuff. But especially after hearing the praise from you guys, I'm gonna hop online later and try to hunt down a GBA copy. I think that sounds like the way to do it.
Nice.
But let's talk about 6, right? Because that's a fucking big one. That was one of the first games I had to knock off of my Super Nintendo collection, though I need to actually sit down and read the novel. And it's fucking iconic, right? Like this is really the game that I think pretty much everyone unanimously agrees defines like older Final Fantasy. It's like it's the epitome of it.
It's the best Final Fantasy game. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
There's a statement.
I have a confession. I have a confession to make. I have not beaten 6.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've probably gotten to the train where you're. No. You know what? There's a part where you're going through as. I want to say Edgar, If that's right, and you're going through, and no, it's not Edgar, it's the other, it's his brother, I think. What's his name? Sabin. Yeah, and you're going through like this waterfall area, and you've got to like hop on like
Wait,
logs
are you
or
talking
something.
about the part of the game where it splits off into the 3 different parts and Sabin's
Yes,
story?
that is where I left off.
That's really early.
Yeah, that's where I left off. Yeah, I didn't get very far. I loved it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I have a complete copy sitting on my shelf, and every single year I'm like, yo, I'm gonna get through it. I got the strategy guide. I may as well go through it, and I just can't find the time to do it. So, one of these days I'll actually sit down and play through Final Fantasy VI. But
yeah, it's a killer fucking game. It's Man, I don't know. It is. I mean, you said it right. It's iconic as hell. When it came out, and I remember it having a huge marketing budget too, because there wasn't often where you would be watching TV as a kid in the 90s and see a commercial for an RPG. And I think Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger is probably the only two that I can remember from that era until the beast that was Final Fantasy VII as far as advertising goes. Yeah, but 6 was absolute insanity. It had such a cool story, and everything, the mechanics, the story, the characters seem to have been just refined to a goddamn art. I mean, everything was almost perfect about the game, but it's not the best Final Fantasy. I will say that right now.
I'm with you on that.
It's
not.
best.
It's great. It is.
It's got. See, so in my opinion, I think it has the best graphics, basically, because it's like peak sprite work in there. Like the jobs, each of the characters are so cool, but at the same time, I guess it is a little bit diluted due to the Esper system, because basically anybody can learn any spell.
Yeah, I kind of like that about it.
See, I kind of do it too, but at the same time, it like dilutes like how pure the classes are, but they still have like their own abilities. Like Edgar has like the tools, and then Sabin has the Street Fighter 2 shit.
Yeah.
Or like,
which by the way, which is fucking hilarious because. The Xbox 360 and its god-awful shit of a fucking D-pad makes emulating that game so terrible because of Sabin. I remember it's fucking insanity. My wife was playing it, and it got to the point where you're with Sabin by himself on the cliff, fighting that guy who like killed his master.
Yeah.
And you can't do his blitz attack because the D-pad's such garbage, and doing it on the fucking keyboard that can't happen.
Yeah, you're better off with like one of those like a fight pad, like the Chun-Li or the Blanca or whatever, like the fight pads, the controllers.
Yeah.
Those have better D-pads. I use that quite a bit for Super Street Fighter 4 and those types of games on 360. But yeah, no, I agree. The D-pad's awful.
6 was cool. My experience with 6 was I actually played 7 first and went back and played 6. And I remember the first thing that went through my head was like, whoa, this is pretty much Final Fantasy 7 on the Super Nintendo. Because the backgrounds were so detailed. It was almost like a pre-rendered background. And then you had animated areas, like let's say in Figaro, you had the fans spinning with like steam coming out of them. And I'm like, at the time, I was obviously an idiot, but to me, that looked like that could have fucking happened on the PS1 almost. It was so
close. The castle
close.
was a fucking land submarine.
That's cool.
It's so cool. Everything's so like the fact that like the world of Ruin, like the entire world in the middle of the game completely changes.
And the other thing that, just speaking of thematically too, it like hits you really strong when you turn on the game too. Like I remember the first time I ever turned on Final Fantasy 3 and I was like, whoa, there's a forest and broken up shit and people and mechs. What the fuck? Like, just sorry to interrupt, but just it really does strike you. You know what I mean? It's just not what you're expecting at all.
You know what it reminds me of? The beginning of Metal Gear Solid for some reason.
Oh, totally.
It's just sort of emotional and those heavy kind of blue like color palettes and stuff, walking through the snow. God, it's killer. Oh, so good.
Especially
I love
at the time. I mean, 1994. Come on, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And this is even a precursor to Chrono Trigger, which came out in '95. I mean, it took Chrono Trigger for me to get into Final Fantasy VI, but like, once you get into Final Fantasy VI, it is so much bigger than Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, for sure.
It is absolutely massive in scale.
Well, I think in some ways, though, the scale of it all while it makes it really grand, and Chat said it best, it's like the darkest, most complex story they ever tried to tell in a Final Fantasy. I feel like the game has some big fucking pacing issues, and I think a lot of it has to do with how just huge it is, generally speaking. I don't know. I feel like the first half of the game drags a little hard, and then once we finally get to Kefka, shit just starts.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Basically, once you get past where Mike Tendo got to, the game is just explodes.
Sure.
Because literally that Sabin mission is where you get introduced to Kefka.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because I was young when the last time I played all the way through it. I don't remember it having a lot of boring parts. I mean, like I've played through it since, but I don't know, man. It seems that the pace is so cool because everything's always leading up to like a big climax, and you always get it. It never leaves you, dissatisfied. Like when you break up, into the different party members the first time. And then you finally get everybody back together, and now you have a main antagonist. And then from there, once you go into the world of Ruin and you find out about Espers and like Magicite, I don't know. I feel like everything is just a constant climb, and you're always reaching a crescendo, and then it gives you a little bit more. I don't know, man. Pacing I thought was killer for Final Fantasy VI, but it has been a while since I played it.
Well, and once you hit World of Ruin, it's basically open. It's like it's completely open.
Yeah, I'm just saying I feel like there are sections, particularly in the start of the game, that do tend to drag their feet a little bit, but it is entirely understandable and not terrible considering the size and scale of the narrative. I just do feel that it is worth noting for some people who might be just wanting to dive in.
You know what drags its feet is fucking Midgar.
Oh, come on.
No, it's funny. No. It's funny you say that just because literally Bane just got here and asked if we had mentioned how Final Fantasy VII was the best RPG ever made. And while half of the chat is talking about how Final Fantasy VI is the best RPG ever made, like.
All right, well then I'll jump ahead and say Final Fantasy VII is the best RPG for Final Fantasy, in my opinion.
Here, I'll tell you what, I am not going to rival that, but I am going to say something a little bit different. It's super subjective to say which is the best Final Fantasy, obviously.
Sure.
To me, I think 7 is the most enjoyable, and it has a lot to do with, like, aesthetics. I think cyberpunk dystopian look that's me to a T, and, like, that's what I like to see. But I will say this. You can make a comment for subjectively which one is the best, but objectively, Final Fantasy VII is the RPG that all other RPGs after it was compared against. No matter if you like it or you don't, that game changed RPGs forever.
Yeah.
That's a completely fair statement. And also, Bane wanted me to correct him. I misread. He was saying 8 because he's out of his fucking mind is the best.
Yeah, no, he's a piece of shit, Bane.
Just everybody stop him real quick. But I almost feel like you could have an entire discussion about Final Fantasy VI versus 7 because that's generally what people say is either the best Final Fantasy or even best RPG. My only thing is for me, and this is something that will come up as we start talking about the PS1 Final Fantasies 2, is characters really make Final Fantasies for me. And I think if we talk about main characters right, 6 just shits on 7. Like, I do not care about Cloud. Do not care about Cloud. Kefka over Sephiroth every fucking day of the week, all day. Like, I don't know. And that's a personal thing. That's like a taste thing. But on the same note, I fucking love Barrett. Everybody who has blood running through their veins enjoys Vincent to some degree, right? Whether or not it's, husbando love or you just appreciate his coat, you know what I mean?
Cool as hell, man.
Sid's amazing, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, but that's what I mean is with the exception of like the very front faces of 7, like the rest of the characters are great. Love Red 13. Yeah, even Kate Sith I really like too, and that's kind of a shout back to 6 too, the whole Esper and all that. But it's really interesting when you look at them next to each other.
He's a piece of shit too. I just don't like it for all the stuff that goes down with him, and so it's like one of those things where like you really hate a character based on how shitty they were to somebody in the game. Yeah. So it's just like, you just never like him and you never use him. So like he's
nobody ever used him in a party. No human being has ever had Kate Sith in their party for more than 20 minutes at a time.
Yeah. Only when you had to. So, no, I don't know. I mean, I felt, pretty much the way you feel about 6 is the way I feel about 7. I actually really, especially with my limited experience with RPGs back then. I mean, it literally, I jumped from Chrono Trigger in 95 to Final Fantasy 7 in 97, or actually shortly after that, probably like 98. So I just completely fell in love with it, and I thought that the characters were so different than Chrono Trigger in so many different ways. Plus, you had a much more like wide variety of characters too. I mean, you had 3 girls, you had a black guy, you had an animal, like you had actually 2 animals technically, I guess, sort of, and then you had like Sid, who's like the this cool fighter pilot guy, like it's just, you had Vincent, who's like the goth, like you had like all these different characters kind of coming together. And that was like back when I was in high school. I was like, probably a year or so into high school. So like that game was like my jam. Like that. Yeah. That's one of those games where I sat down and I had pretty much unlimited time because I was in high school. So I just played through it and sat there with the guide, going through page by page and just memorizing the entire game. So it's a great experience.
When I met my wife, she used to bring game manuals to school and read them because she couldn't play, her video games at school. And when I met in our high school Spanish class, she was listening to Morbid Angel on her headphones and reading the Final Fantasy VII manual. And like the fact that I was able to contain myself and not make love to her right there.
You didn't propose right there?
Absolute insanity. I did from that moment on declare that I was in love with her, and she thought I was bullshitting her. And now, like 12 years now later, it's a lie. I didn't love her.
It's all been a ruse.
I just wanted Morbid Angel CDs.
Okay. There is a lot of praise you can give Final Fantasy VII, but the one thing I'm gonna say, and this is like my maybe unpopular, probably popular opinion, is even though I don't necessarily think Final Fantasy VII is the best Final Fantasy, I think it is the best soundtrack. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad Final Fantasy soundtrack. They're all really good, and each game has like 2 or 3 just completely stellar tracks on it. But every single song on the 7 soundtrack is just phenomenal, man. Mm-hmm. Like there's so many. It's the first game soundtrack next to the Vice City soundtrack, which doesn't count because it was all licensed music, that I actually went out and bought. I was like, no, I want to listen to this shit. I'm buying it.
Vice City really does have the best soundtrack of anything ever.
It's absolutely amazing. Like that 12 CD collection got played to death. But it was the first CD I bought when I got iTunes too. Even though I'd bought a hard copy, I'm like, well, this is obviously what I'm going to want to put on my iPod. Are you kidding me? So with all of the praise you can get 7, and with the criticism you can give it 2, my big thing is that soundtrack just fucking blows me away every single time I listen to it.
Yeah, there were two discs that I bought. The very first 2 CDs that I bought for video game soundtracks. One was Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and then the second was 2 copies of Final Fantasy VII.
That seems a little excessive, honestly.
Well, I screwed up. So I thought it was 2 different soundtracks. It turns out one was the American version and the other was the Japanese version. So I accidentally bought both. So yeah.
Yeah, fuck it. No joke. The first time when I first got I was working at a Subway. My very first job ever. My 2 first purchases with my money was Symphony of the Night and Final Fantasy VII soundtracks off of eBay. Nice. No joke.
That's awesome.
See, this is another funny thing too. Final Fantasy VII was the first time that I can think of hearing a video game rumor and it being true, as weird as that sounds, because there was all that bullshit about being able to bring Aerith back and all that, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. But, I grew up, PS1 was my first console, so I grew up hearing shit like, dude, there's a naked Lara Croft code, all this shit, you know what I mean? But then when I heard that you could actually do the date at Gold Saucer, you could do Cloud and Barrett, I'm like, oh yeah, sure, that's a real thing that's in the game.
Yeah.
And then I fucking saw it and I was like, what? Oh my god, that's real! Like it was the first time that I had heard something like that, and it turned out to be true. Like there are a lot of things in that game that I just have really fond memories of, and just sticking with me. Not to mention, when I beat that, it was the first full length RPG I had beaten, and just like it felt like heavy. Like I remember sitting there the next couple of days, just like, what do I do with my life? I don't know where I don't know where to go from here. You know what I mean? So it's not my favorite Final Fantasy, but I can see why people would say that it is. I can see the argument. I think it's completely sound. Same with 6. To be fair, I don't necessarily have a favorite Final Fantasy, and I feel like my answer would just be to enrage people regardless, but it really is a phenomenal game. I'm pretty nervous about the remake that's coming out, the episodic thing.
I was going to mention that actually because you brought up the whole Cloud and Barrett thing, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff that is in the original that I feel like they're just going to completely cut out, and that's a shame because I mean, roll the dice. Pick whichever one is going to be cut first. Either the Cloud and Barrett date, offending people. The whole
Honeybee Inn.
What's it called when you're in the Honeybee Inn?
Yeah, the Honeybee Inn's gonna get
that whole scene getting cut. Cloud cross-dressing is probably going to get cut. Tifa's breast size is going to get cut. All that stuff is going to get cut for all the wrong reasons.
That's even the least of my worries. The fact of the matter is, if anybody was going to make an episodic RPG and do it well, it's not going to be Squaresoft.
Or Square Enix, yeah.
It's never going to fucking happen. Even it being an active time game, all right, that's going to fuck around with a lot of the game's environments, because a lot of times you were in tight claustrophobic areas and you got transported into this fight, and it just made sense thematically to me. I guess just in my brain there was like no cognitive dissonance there. But then when you're walking around Midgar in like this trash pile, I just don't see the Final Fantasy 15 engine working as well, and I don't know, they're just gonna have to alter a lot of the game's environments for me. Like, imagine going through the Mako reactors, and instead of like a tight rat's nest of cables, you're in this wide open space that lets you do a lot of evasive maneuvering and shit.
Yeah, I'm extremely worried about that. The fact that it's not turn based.
Yeah, I think we all are, and Squaresoft's a bunch of fucking idiots.
I think the bottom line, though, is that we're most likely all going to buy it.
We will.
Because,
I buy every Final Fantasy.
That's the worst part.
Not even good.
Flip the desk. Fuck, I'm going to burn my wallet. It's like, it's almost prejudiced at this point for me. I can think of so few examples outside of Telltale games where like they do episodic games correctly. Like, it's not that I think it's a bad format, it's that I think people are really fucking stupid when they try to use it. And somebody being like, we're going to take a like 60, 80 hour narrative and bust it down into episodic games. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude?
All right.
Idea.
So I don't know. I don't want to speak for all of you, but I feel very positive about the game in the sense that even though it's episodic, one, it better be physical. I better get each one of those games that they're coming out with, volumes 1 through whatever, better come out on disc, because
happen. They'll do a collection.
You really don't think so?
100%.
I don't see them releasing them individually. That seems pretty far-fetched.
$37 right now. That won't fucking happen.
That is just, to me, that's like a gold mine, and I just wouldn't be able to handle being able to wait for it like a TV show where you got to wait like an entire year just to see it, and because it's Square Enix, it's going to take like 3 years per chapter. Like, I don't know, but
we'll be in our 40s by the time it's done.
Yeah, well, some of us will be in our mid 40s. But yeah, no, I don't know. I'm excited about it. I'm also terrified about it.
Yeah,
but exactly. I feel that they're gonna. In my opinion, I think they're gonna get the music right. I think they're gonna get the characters right, and I think that they're gonna do a good job as far as like the layout of the story. And I think that they're gonna add a lot more, which I'm actually really excited about, because I feel like they're gonna flesh out a lot more things that they kind of just skimmed over, or they kind of introduce, like Barrett's relationship with Marlene and that type of stuff. So
that's fair. I don't know. I feel like it's going to be one of those things that's either going to be amazing and fantastic, and everyone's going to be like, "Sweet, I can't believe I got this. This is great," or it's going to be fucking steaming garbage. I don't think it's not one of those projects that I think is going to land anywhere in the middle. Like, there's no gray.
Either
You know what
way,
I mean?
either way, we'll still always have the original to fall back on. So
This is true. This is true. Well, here, why don't we move on to Mr. Serenity Bane's favorite game and what might be, not even kidding you, my least favorite Final Fantasy. But let's go ahead and move on to 8 because that's one that everyone has mixed opinions on. Let me explain to you my experience with 8. Right, the first time I see it, I'm at a mall. I'm at Sam Goody or whatever the fuck, who knows, right? And they have a like display playing the like cinematic trailer for the game, and I'm like, whoa, fucking big ass sea monsters and gun swords, and oh, this game looks pretty cool. And then I get it for that Christmas and I can't wait to play it, and I put it in, and you play through the first section, you're like, oh cool, this is pretty action packed, all that, and then all of a sudden you're in high school and I'm like, what am I playing? And then from then on, not only are you just like in high school, and I know I keep bringing up this reference in episodes, but it's the same reason I fucking hate Catcher in the Rye. I cannot listen to Squall. It's just like the whiniest shit, and I just don't fucking care. Like, it drives me crazy. I hate that game. And it's because Final Fantasies for me are about the characters. That's what I remember. It's not even mainly the story. It's the personalities in it. You know what I mean? And so I look at 8 and it's like, who do you like? Irving?
Yeah.
And
Quistis,
the teacher, right? Quistis?
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. I do
Those
not
are the two most likable. Yeah.
Nobody else. I do not care about them. And like the other thing I like about the game, and I will give it credit where credit is due, I think it has some of the coolest summons out of the whole franchise.
I agree.
In terms of the way that they are visually designed and the way that their spells work and things, I think the summons in 8 are crisp. I will give them even fucking Doom Train, I think, is good shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But besides the summons in those two characters, I cannot stand it.
And it
is
weird too.
It's just
shit about
that's a grind. Do you want to talk about a grind? The junction system is a grind.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Here's the thing about Final Fantasy VIII is a lot of people don't like it, and I get that. I don't not like it. I definitely think it's one of the weaker Final Fantasies. I can appreciate it in a lot of ways, and one of the reasons why is I kind of have a cool little nostalgic connection to it. I had a neighbor who had like gotten into the Final Fantasy games kind of through me. I showed him Final Fantasy VII, and he just fucking jumped into the Final Fantasy series. And when Parasite Eve came out, he bought it right then and there so he can grab that Final Fantasy VIII demo.
Oh, yeah.
House, and we played it, and it was probably like 2 days before Christmas, and that was just a really cool night for me. Also at the time, I was watching bootleg Japanese dramas like Ikebukuro Westgate Park, and Final Fantasy VIII is a J-drama. Like, that's the thing. A lot of people don't get it.
Right.
Like, it is the quintessential late 90s, early 2000s Japanese drama, and it works sort of in that way, especially how Cloud is like that. The junction system, I think, is interesting, but it's just, I got too stressed out. I would have, like, how many Firagas? Junction to my strength. Great, now I can't cast fire, because then I'm going to be weaker. That's a terrible idea. That's so stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I like the Guardian Forces also. They looked amazing. I actually downloaded little QuickTime files of all of the summons, just to see them before the game came out, and I was fucking shitting my pants.
they're really good. Like, in all seriousness, I have that first run they did. I forget which company it was, but the Final Fantasy summons set. I have like a bunch of the first runs of them. So I have like the Knight of the Round and the Demi and like Mateus from 12 and Yoshimitsu from 10. Like, oh man, I don't know. That's another thing, just for the record, that we didn't really touch on that I did want to bring up, is that that's another one of the big reoccurring defining things in Final Fantasy for me, is if a Final Fantasy has shitty summons, it's going to piss me off. That's one of my big criticisms for Final Hallway 13, besides everything else about the game, is that, like, I don't want to drive summons. What the fuck is this? Get this out of my face. Like,
I pretty much hate any game where you can summon a monster and then take control of it. That should be a one-time, super powerful, like, huge MP sync that does a lot of damage. It should be a risk reward. I can't stand it when people try to, like, legitimize summons in the game world. like with Final Fantasy VIII, where the Guardian forces are actually worked into the story, and it just makes them feel more fake. You know, when people are actually talking about them out loud, I can sort of suspend my disbelief if it's taking place in a fantastical battle in a 3D world. But when people are talking about them openly with other party members, like, yeah, Guardian Force to take your memory, what are you going to do? Like, that just seems fucking ridiculous to me.
So, my big problem with the summons is that they're not skippable after the first time. Really, what it should have been, the way they should have done it, in my opinion, is in regular battles, meaning non-boss battles, they should have been skippable after the first time you watch them. And for the boss fights, like the big boss fights, they should have not been skippable. That way it feels more cinematic, I guess, and more important that you're using the summons. And you can, if they leave it optional, I don't know. I see no point in them, not doing that. But my big
never skip them, but I do agree that the option should be there.
Yeah, no, I just got tired of watching them for a basic fight. I'd be like, why am I watching this for the 15th time? Why am I staring at, Ifrit? So, Final Fantasy VIII and we have a very torrid relationship. So since this podcast is very mature, I will use mature language, even though normally on my channel and my podcast we generally don't. So for the little kids, yes. So for the little kids listening, turn it off. But so Final Fantasy VII had come out, and I absolutely fell head over heels in love with it. And in my mindset, Final Fantasy VIII was going to be 10 times better. And I was so pumped. I remember they released all the action figures of all the characters, and I went out and bought them all. Like, I completely was into it. I bought the strategy guide and everything. Game comes out, I buy it day one, right? Pre-order it, buy it. Get it home, start playing it. And I'm actually pretty much enjoying it. Like, I had fan favorites, as we said earlier, Irving, Quistis. Those were my two favorites. Squall, I knew he was emo, but I was also a teenager, so I was kind of like, yeah, man, I get it. Fuck everything, So, but what absolutely killed Final Fantasy VIII for me, and I've talked about this on my podcast before, when you get up to a point, and this is mild spoilers, FYI, you get up to, I think it's the second disc, maybe, and you end up finding out that all of the characters know each other because they went to the same orphanage. Yeah. And Edea was her name, right? Edea, who's like the sorceress, like the big baddie, used to be like their teacher or the den mother, if you will. And the reason they forgot all of that was because of their summons. And I was like, this is bullshit. Yep. I turned the game off and I stopped playing it. And I actually sold the game. I was so angry. I was like, this is the biggest bullshit plot twist I have ever seen in the history of video games.
Shyamalan!
I was so, oh my God, I was so angry. So a couple years later, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I was unfair on Final Fantasy VIII. So I buy it again. Used for like $14 or whatever. I get it home. I start it up again. I get to the part where that happens again, and I'm like, fuck this game. I turn it off, sell it again. I just like, so a third time, I ended up rebuying it. And I have not put the game in yet. I have the guide still. I have the game. And one of these days, somebody's going to have to like duct tape the PlayStation 2 shut so that I don't get up and like throw a huge tantrum, because holy shit, that is like the worst fucking plot twist. Anyways.
Yeah, no. I agree. I think we all.
I'm at 100% in the same boat. So I've beaten Final Fantasy VIII, but every time I quit playing it is always at the end of Disc 3, because it has what might be one of my single favorite moments out of any RPG I've ever played. And for those of you who've played it, it's how you get Gilgamesh with Odin. Yeah. Like, that whole thing, literally one of my favorite moments out of any RPG. Because, like, they don't tell you. You're just, like, playing this boss fight, going through the motions, and then, oh my God, he killed him. What is happening? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's just so natural and organic. And, like, that, one of my favorite RPG moments ever, for the record, out of that trash fucking game. Love that moment. But Because, you have the whole thing with the orphanage, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, I'm going to stick it out. This game jumped the shark. It was bad to begin with, but who knows? We'll bring it home. And then by disc 3, I'm just like, nope. I'm like about to get to the final act, and every single time I'm just like, I do not care.
So, I kind of have a similar story to both of you guys. So, I was super hyped about it before it came out. Got it day one. Played it. Kind of forced myself to enjoy it. Because, I really didn't dig the junction system at all, like the Guardian Force shit. Like, that was a pretty massive departure from the Magicite and the way they did it in 7.
Yeah.
So I was kind of bummed about that. But then I kept playing it, kept slogging through it. Got the first save point on the 4th disc, right? My memory card corrupted. I never played the game again.
Oh.
Am I the
That
only
sucks.
person to beat Final Fantasy VIII on this?
No,
podcast?
I've beaten it. I just, every time I play it, quit at the same fucking place because I'm like, this game's garbage.
I think there's definitely a payoff as far as the ending goes. It is just absolutely nonsensical where the story goes from there. The time travel is hard to work in a game, and it feels like Final Fantasy VIII actively tried to make a crappy story with time travel. But at the end, when you see everybody come together and the Renoa Squall love story starts to come to a head, and I don't know, man. It was a really emotional ending, even though I wasn't crazy invested in the game. And it probably has a lot to do with that whole Japanese drama feel. Like, it felt like the characters were like a TV show, and I'd gotten a little bit attached to. I think there is a payoff for it. So, like, if you're like everybody in this podcast and you get to that point and you're like, oh, we're all orphans. Oh, we all know each other. Edea was our teacher. Sid was married to Edea. And you keep going, what the can you please make something that happens throughout the game that I'm not completely surprised by, that's not stupid? Get past that point and then force yourself to keep playing. And at the end of 65 hours, when the game is over, it'll be okay.
It's like watching the flower. It's like watching the flower scene, the flower shop scene from The Room, just like over and over again. It's just awful.
See,
and
okay.
fuck Selfie. I want to hit Selfie with a truck. She is the worst character. Oh my god, I hate her.
The nunchuck girl?
Yeah, the nunchuck girl who's just like, I like trains. Like, I hated that
description. It's just funny that that's the way you pitch it, Jared, because for me, it's the exact opposite. For me, the ending of that game, while I'll admit, like, thematically and, like, all the shit with Ragnarok, that the action's pretty solid, right? But I never cared about Squall. I never cared about that love story. So, like, for me, whenever I get to disc 3 and then fucking Cypher, because fuck you, Luke, it's not Cypher, this is America, and that's how they say it in Japan, too, you can suck my dick.
It's Cypher. That is Cypher.
When he kills Odin and you get Gilgamesh, it's just like, this is the best point of the game. Everything else is garbage. Just turn it off.
What does he think it's Cypher? He thinks it's Cypher?
He thinks it's Cypher.
Okay.
Boo.
If you ever want to tilt him, argue with him about it because it breaks his soul, and I hope he hears this. I love you, Luke, baby, but it's nonsense. Absolutely.
So not to promote too much, but I'm doing a new show on my channel called Gaming Linguistics, and we're tackling like pronunciations of
Chrono.
Yeah, like Chrono versus Chrono. Marley, Marl, right.
Marley.
Yeah, but that's definitely one I want to tackle because I've never heard of Cypher.
But can we say this though? Because so far, Final Fantasy VIII is ranking somewhere between terrible and okay, as far as we're all concerned. But can we at least say the soundtrack, while a huge departure,
is great.
It's incredible.
It is,
and I do like the art design too. Even though I think the setting and all that shit is dumb, I really do like. It's well executed. It's very cohesive. At no point are you torn out of it. Like,
I agree. And that's
dumb. It's just really stupid. It's like it's really pretty and sounds good, but it's just really dumb.
You know what? One problem with it being like the graphics though is a lot of like the areas you walk through are pretty small, and you know how you have like the fixed camera angle, which was a pretty standard thing back then. But man, when you would move from screen to screen, it took like 5 seconds to load that shit, dude. Like that drove me crazy.
I never noticed that being a problem, but maybe if I replayed it recently, I would. I would say that. You know, I actually got to meet Nobuo Uematsu once, and I told him how much like his music changed my life. That was fucking cool.
Yeah, I met him at MagFest, and kind of the same thing. I thanked him for all his hard work. He was a nice guy.
Japanese.
I mean that's also
I did not know.
for the record too. I mean he's also arguably like the most famous person in soundtracks, right? Like I have yet to meet somebody who doesn't know who he is who plays.
Yeah, I think him and then Yoko Kanno in anime are two of like the most famous Japanese.
Koji Kondo too, I would say.
Fair enough. Or if you're Nico, then Fallen Bros. But I want to move on to 9.
64.
I want to move on to 9 because I do want to try to touch on all the games before we get to the quiz. And I know this episode is going to be long. We already talked about it, but let's move on to 9 because for me, fuck Bane, 9 is probably my favorite Final Fantasy. It's really tough for me to say, but probably 9. And I know that that's an unpopular opinion, but the reasons why, okay, this is my whole pitch, right, is that all the characters in that game are fucking awesome in their own way. I'm not saying they're creative necessarily, but each one has a personality. You know what I mean? Like, I don't hate them, even if I don't like them. They're like, when I think of 7 or the vast majority of the cast of 8, there are characters I just despise, but I never got that with 9. The gameplay fantasy for me in 9 feels absolutely fantastic too. It feels like a love story to all the other Final Fantasies. Like Black Mage feels like fucking Black Mage. Right, Dragoon feels like Dragoon. And then the other thing too, and even people who like 9 hate me when I say this, but I fucking love Quina. I've always really enjoyed Blue Mages. It's always been one of my favorite classes. It's okay, Jared. You can get that look, baby. You've given me that look before, or at least the back of my head. But the fact that her blue magic is she fucking eats monsters. That's how she learns it. I don't know. Everything about 9, it felt actually like a fantasy game again. It didn't feel like some weird sci-fi, strange fucking what's this floating garden shenanigans. It felt like Final Fantasy, and that's why I really like it. I think it's funny. It's got a lot of personality. Love the card game, and I just think it's fun. It probably is my favorite Final Fantasy.
Squaresoft's 2 biggest failures visually, in my opinion, are Final Fantasy IX and Chrono Cross. Those are the 2 biggest disappointments for sequels that I ever had with Squaresoft, back when they were Squaresoft. You know, for all my hate against 8, I really like the art direction and the characters. Like, visually, they were really cool looking. Whereas 9 was not only a return to form to, like, the first 3 games visually, but also it
was, like, really chibi.
It was super chibi, like 7, but not, like, I don't know. I just didn't like the art design of 9, so I've never actually sat down and played it. So it's hard for me to make a judgment call on 9 in terms of gameplay. I'm sure the gameplay is great, but I just can't get past... Like, if a game doesn't have cool-looking characters to me, I'm not a big fan of playing games that don't have characters that I can't get into. So 9 was really tough for me to get into. And Chrono Cross, just because there's way too many freaking characters in that game. And to me, an RPG needs to be small cast of characters, not this, like, 110 optional characters. I just want, like, 7 to 10 characters. Let me fall in love with them, and then go from there.
Final Fantasy VI is about the maximum number of characters you probably want.
Yeah.
And that's
guys,
what, 16?
8 Suikoden games.
Yeah, I was gonna say y'all must not have played that shit. I swear to God, we could do a whole podcast on Chrono Cross because playing that game in my youth versus revisiting it as an adult, I have way more respect for that game as an adult.
I love it.
Like, that game kicks fucking ass. Chrono Cross is the shit. The game's really
Cross
good.
Is the sequel that Chrono Trigger needed. It was Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation. As far as what it represented, we'll get into that probably in a different podcast because I got a lot of fucking views on that.
Okay,
that's a lot of words for I don't like Suikoden. Yeah, that's true. But back to your whole argument on the art style of 9. That's fair. That is like an opinion, and I think it's very similar to the people who rag on Wind Waker for how it looks visually, right? But while I agree that even though I hate 8, it really does look good. That art style, like the game, looks fucking awesome. What they really were trying to do with 9 is, like, say you look at Final Fantasy 2, right? and say you render that character in 3D, but it's not shitty 3D like Final Fantasy VII. You're actually like rendering the character into 3D, right? The vast majority of the time, they're going to come out looking like how they do in 9. Like how they have the small bodies and big ass heads, and you know what I mean? So I understand that it's weird and it's kind of chibi and everybody more or less looks like children, and that's kind of strange, but it never really bothered me because it made sense. You know what I mean? Like it didn't really throw me off. That and the characters that I really liked visually, I still think really look awesome. Like Freya, she still looks really cool. To be fair though, I've always really liked I forget what they're called. Don't crucify me, but the rat people in the Final Fantasy universe, I've always really thought that they looked really fucking cool.
But Seven, so my argument against that, not to beat around the bush, but 7. The characters are chibi, but then they turned into, when you were fighting or whatever, or during cutscenes, they turned into these very adult, very cool looking characters. And I could relate to that a lot more. And I could kind of say, okay, this is how the characters are supposed to look. But because of the limitations of the gameplay and the visuals and everything, they had to squish everybody down. So visually and mentally, I was able to understand that. But with 9, what you see is what you get. The chibi characters and the regular sized characters are exactly the same, and that's where the disconnect is for me.
I do think it was weird visually seeing these chibi characters rendered in CG also during the cutscenes. Here, my thing is Final Fantasy IX looked okay to me. I wanted that more realistic look of Final Fantasy VIII. I always likened it to like Resident Evil meets a Final Fantasy game, the way their proportions are more realistic.
That's totally fair. No, visually, I think that's a very fair statement.
With Final Fantasy IX, I understood it was an artistic decision, and I always have seen it like that. I don't like the design of the characters, but graphically, I think the pre-rendered backgrounds look great. And the overall look of the game is pretty good. It's not bad, but as someone who upscales all of his video games, playing Final Fantasy IX through like a good RGB connection, upscaled to 720p, it's a very you were talking about how in Final Fantasy VII they looked all blocky, but that was like a very easy to identify 3D model, whereas the 3D in Final Fantasy IX is made up of so many polygons, and there's kind of like a discordance between all the different colors of the polygons, and then there's the warping that's inherent to the PS1's video output. It's probably the worst looking 3D on the PS1 for me, because I like the more simple 3D on the PS1. It's a little easier to artistically identify.
It doesn't look like just a garbled mess of pixels on a polygon.
That's what Final Fantasy IX looks like in battles to me. And it's something, if you played it through composite on a CRT, you'll probably never see, and it's not even an issue.
Yeah, that's the only way I've ever played it. So like.
But 9 to me has always been just an okay game. I think the soundtrack's probably the weakest in the series, though. It has some really good songs. It's more medieval sounding songs, like the song that plays during the title screen. Really great. And then the rest of the music was trying a little too hard to sound retro. Like it was. I think it was simply the way it's written and the style and like note progression is just very simple and like kind of lacked a lot of complexity because they're trying to go for a more retro feel for it. Other than that, though, it was an okay game. It was all right. I didn't like the learning skills from equipment, but it wasn't terrible.
I don't know. I've always kind of liked that shit just because it gives you more flexibility to make a class and thing. But on the subject of like how it looks, I think regardless of whether you're upscaling it and complaining about having it look too good and seeing shit like that, or you're playing it, virtual or on a disc or whatever, right? I think the main issue is that it's polarizing regardless. It's not an art style where people are like, you know what I mean? You're either going to be like, oh, that's cool, or you're going to be like, oh, dear God, please bleach my eyes right now. And so my whole argument is that if you haven't played it due to the fact that it looks weird, I really do recommend sitting down there. I think there's a hell of a game in there. I really do. In terms of like the way it plays and stuff, all the characters have such like clear class identity to them and feel like they should. My big complaint would be that you don't get summons until 2/3 of the way through the game when you get your first summoner. I will absolutely give that criticism, but it's
Can you admit that the summons are a step back from Final Fantasy VIII graphically?
Oh, absolutely. I think 8 probably has, in my opinion, the best versions of summons. Whether or not the whole story behind them is fucking retarded or not, in terms of like use and presentation, I think 8 has the best summons. I genuinely.
It looks so good in that game. God damn
like
it.
even better than 7. Like I really do think the summons in 8's just fucking kick ass. That's just all it is to. But just if you haven't played 9 because you think it's ugly, please give it a chance. I absolutely love that game. And it also is my favorite card game out of any of the Final Fantasies too. Like the weird mini games that they put in Final Fantasies all the time, right? I think the card game in 9.
8 made 0 sense.
No, it was stupid. I hated going to a different region and then you would just randomly play someone in cards. And they'd be like, yeah, you know that rule set you just fucking hated from that guy? You're going to transfer it to everywhere you go, and everyone you talk to is going to start using that rule set. Stupid.
Yeah, I hated losing cards permanently. Like, I remember really cherishing, like, having, like, an Ifrit card, and then I would lose the Ifrit card, and I would just give up on the card game. I would just be like, no, I want that card. Like, that's the point of me playing this game, is to collect all the good cards. You just took it away. I want it back. So...
Yeah, I get that.
But we do have a few more modern Final Fantasies to talk about before we get into the quiz. So let's go ahead and slide into 10. Or as I like to call it, because swear to God, that's all that fucking sticks with me from that game. Man. I'm not going to shit on Final Fantasy X because it's not a bad game. I can't lie and say it's a bad game because it's not. It's a good fucking game. But it...
This is when character design... It's when character design started to get absolutely retarded, like
just really fucking bad. The whole cast is a bunch of fucking clowns,
really
like straight up like circus makeup and the herk, like the whole 9 yards, dude. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is another thing I'm actually I talk about in the video I'm editing, and you guys might not have noticed this yet, but it's something I was kind of like woken up to. And when I mention this to you and whoever else is listening, you will not be able to unknow and unsee this.
Oh no!
Final Fantasy X was part of a game design fucking parade that came out of Japan, and for some reason this entire era of games had a coastal island fishing village theme. Look at Chrono Cross and what's the Legaia sequel for the PS2 and Final Fantasy X. All of them took place in small tropical islands, and everybody was dressed like fucking idiots. Like even Tidus, he was wearing like a fisherman's getup with his like suspenders and fucking thing. They all look like idiots because they all look like they're vacationing in fucking Costa Rica. I don't know what it is. And talking shit about Chrono Cross. I fucking love Chrono Cross, but I cannot stand that Caribbean design theme.
Yeah.
4 on the PS2 did it also.
I'm with you.
There's something about it. Like during the late PS1, early PS2 era, everybody's like boats and water. We gotta have them. We gotta have palm trees.
Wind Waker.
There you go, Wind Waker.
Yeah, same thing.
What the fuck was happening to the RPGs? God damn it. That's Final Fantasy X right there.
Yeah,
no,
like,
that's a totally fair point.
Ken just didn't make sense, like with the character design. Like you had, you had all the like Caribbean characters, but then you had Lulu, which didn't make any sense because she's wearing like a belt skirt dress, and she's wearing like fur, and like she's all gothed out, and you're looking at her and you're like, man, she must be sweating in that thing. Like that must be really hot in this Caribbean weather. And then you've got the other characters like what's his name?
Can we agree? Ren looks
Amari,
super
the giant cat guy.
Yeah, I think the best characters out of that game, everybody likes Auron because he's the only character that has any design put into him or thought at all. Yeah. And Kimari's pretty cool, but like I said, I like Blue Mages and Lancers, so that was a pretty easy home run for me.
I liked Riku.
Riku was
I can see that. I think she was performed well. I think a lot of the reason that character is good isn't necessarily the character, but how she's written and performed. Because as horribly atrocious as the voice acting is in that game, Tara Strong's performance of Riku isn't. Like that's not one of the bad ones. You know what I mean?
I think one thing we have to discuss about too with Final Fantasy X is it really was like the first like voice acted, like fully voice acted.
Yeah.
And then also like when that game first came out, like it looked better than the cutscenes in any of the previous games. It was insane. When it came out in 2001, like I remember I was a sophomore in high school when that came out, and everyone was playing it. Everyone was talking about it. Like, oh,
Well, the
which
game is
battle
really
are you
good.
on, yeah, I
The
thought
game's good,
I think
and
it's
it
really
holds
good.
up too. Like I feel like some of the Final Fantasies, when you go back to them, the like buzz you get when you play them for the first time, kind of, it's like that whole rose shaded glasses thing, But Final Fantasy X holds up. It's a really good game in how it plays and like how it's designed. And
The battle system kicked
I don't-
ass in that one too.
I don't even think the story's bad. It's just my problem is it's told with really stupid fucking characters, and like, you know what I mean?
Actually pretty good. Towards the end, the story gets really dark, and I like that.
Yeah, all the shit with sin and going inside it, like all there's nothing wrong with that. And the other thing too is, I know we talked about grinding earlier and how it can be done correctly. That game is a grinder's dream. That's one of the things where I did really like the grinding, not only because you were getting more summons and there were secret summons and all the secret weapons and all that shit, but filling out the
Sphere grid?
what is it, Monster Rancher, whatever his name was, the guy where you could like capture monsters and then go fight them and there were like secret bosses. That shit was awesome.
That was in the Comlands. Yeah, I remember that.
Also, Blitzball was legit.
No, it
Kind of
wasn't.
reminds me of Australian football, but I played the shit out of Blitzball, dude. We had like a neighborhood league. It was good.
2 points in Blitzball ever in the whole. I probably put 104 hours into that game. 2 points I might have scored in Blitzball at any one time.
I hated Blitzball.
I find that surprising. I feel like a lot of the people I know, that's one of the big praises they give it, is that Blitzball's pretty fun.
I didn't mind it. I mean, I played 10. I didn't beat it, but I got really far in it. I probably put about 20 hours into it. I got up to the point where, and I actually just talked about this on the latest Pixel Tunes, which will be out tomorrow. But I got to the point where I sat down with some friends after replaying Final Fantasy VII again, and we were like, oh, what game do you want to play now? We're like, oh, Final Fantasy X, let's try that one. So we sat down, we had the guide, we tried to go through it. We got to the point where you're trying to get the ultimate weapon. I think it was Tidus's ultimate weapon, and you've got to dodge lightning 200 times in order to get it.
That's Lulu's.
Yeah.
It's
is it Lulu's? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the 200 lightning dodge is horse shit.
Oh my god. So we did it maybe about 50 to 60 times, and we kept bowing out right around that time, and I was like, I'm done. And we were like, oh, we'll get back to it, and we never did. I still have the same save file and everything, but like, I feel like I hate that because I hate dumping 20 hours into a game, especially an RPG, and then being like setting it down for a really long time and then trying to go back to it. It's like, forget it.
It's impossible
Like,
to pick an
yeah.
RPG if you set it down for too long.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna have to restart it at some point.
Set it down for like with Star Ocean till the end of time. If you put that game down and you walk back 3 days later, forget about it. Start a new fucking game. You're not finding where you got him going.
But yeah, it really is a good game. I'm not saying it's a bad game, but I think it is a game that is weighed down heavily by the weakness in its characters.
Well, it was revolutionary, but it's aged a little poorly, I'd say.
Yeah.
Which is also, I was always surprised that they made 10-2. I know we haven't talked about any of the spin-off games, and I really don't want to that much, but I don't understand how 10-2 got.
10-2 was like the first direct sequel to any of them, though. Like, I mean, there's like
It was,
like
and
Legends and that kind of shit. But
it was the first direct sequel, and the other thing too is, having actually played that game rather extensively, as completely stupid as it is, the dress system is sick because it's just the job system. That's just all it is.
I actually really like 10-2.
The fighting engine is probably one of the better in the series as far as like fast paced fucking. It was turn based, but somehow it was super energetic and fast. I love 10-2's fighting engine.
I'm just saying, I don't understand how it got made. That's what I'm saying. I don't like.
So has anybody? I gotta ask. Has anybody played the re-released or the remastered versions of 10 and 10-2? Are they worth it?
I own them, but I haven't played them.
I've played them on the Vita. I've played them on the PS3, and I have the Steam version as well. They're
so you'd say
I mean,
they're good?
like especially like if you play like the PS2 version and then put in the HD version. The HD version is what you remember it looking like.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because you
I'll
play
have
that
to pick it
PS2
up.
version,
I mean,
and it looks really bad nowadays.
Yeah, I have the original, but I feel like I should upgrade to the get rid of Final Fantasy X and just get the upgrade, because it's just why bother?
I'd highly recommend the Vita version.
Yeah, I don't have a Vita, so
Then
yeah,
whatever you have then.
PS4. Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
moving on, though, I don't think we need to talk about Final Fantasy 11. It was the first MMO Final Fantasy, but did any of us fucking play it?
I bought it day one.
Can we say one thing about Final Fantasy 11 is me and my wife both used to play the shit out of that way back. It's still, to this day, the only MMORPG I put any real time into other than Ragnarok Online. And I always play a girl in any game I play. Don't fucking know why. I might be trans. I'm not sure. But I was playing a girl in this game, and I was in like not a beginner dungeon, but sort of close to a beginner's dungeon. And some guy kind of helped me through it, and I was like, fuck, thanks a lot. And he's like, hey, let's go over to this place. And I'm following him around, and he's like, oh, here it is. This is what I was talking about. And then he sits down on this cliffside and asks me to sit down with him, and he starts talking about how beautiful it is. And then I realized I'm on a date with this man.
Yep. I can tell you sometime, and not this podcast just because it's already running late and all that shit, but one time, right when I moved to the notorious roleplay World of Warcraft server Goldshire, I actually got sexually assaulted on the server. It was a very interesting experience, but I'll save that story for another time. Let's talk about 12, because I feel like that's another game that I absolutely love that people generally fucking hate.
I really want to check it out.
Terrible.
Okay,
Damn.
well, first off, fuck you, Dubious. I know we've had this argument 1,000 fucking times, but here's my thing, okay? It's set in one of my favorite Final Fantasy universes because it's set in Avarice or whatever you call it, the tactics world.
Evenly.
It's set in, evenly. It's set in that universe, which first off is fucking dope. I really, really like that setting. I think it's cool.
Let me just jump in real quick. Everybody always says it's set in Ivalice, and technically it is, but what it's set in is the fucking Game Boy Advance Ivalice, where there's like bunny people, fucking bunny ears. Ivalice is Final Fantasy Tactics on the PS1, which was a dark, like, turn-of-the-century medieval area, and not a fucking fun, happy-go-lucky, there are strippers who have bunny ears on. I fucking hate modern Ivalice. It is so gay. But
Please continue.
So 12 is the one that I've wanted to play for a very long time, but visually, I don't know. You know, as I said before, the character design and aesthetics are really important to me, but also color palette's really important too.
The
and
palette's really bad.
Yeah, like 10 was great because it was so colorful. It was
Very
so
nice.
gorgeous and very pretty. And 8 had the same, very colorful world. So did 7, even though 7 was very dark
So
at
did
points.
9. Are you kidding me? But
9 did too, but again, the character design.
that's fair. That's fair. Sorry, I was just saying that game had a great palette as well.
Right. So 12, all the characters look like somebody dumped Call of Duty paint on them. Like they all look brown and like distilled and very bland looking. Like not even like the art, like I think the character design is really well done, but the visual colors just look really bland in that game. For every screenshot, every video that I've seen, and maybe I just need to see it in motion and play it myself, but that was my big complaint and why I never picked it up.
No, and
Here's the thing.
The battle system's trash in it too. I mean, it's an offline.
Oh my
MMO.
god, it is not! Holy shit, it is
it's
not
an
that
offline
bad!
MMO. Why would you play it? I'd just go play an MMO.
And you get to fucking program the AI so you can figure out their strategy and make it very specific.
Gross.
Okay,
I don't
Okay,
want
here
to
you go.
Here,
I want
no,
turn-based.
hold the fuck on. Okay, no, I'm the only person who likes this game, so I'm gonna say my goddamn 2 cents. Okay, even though the battle system I think is sort of the start of where we see the real shit from modern Final Fantasy start, and I will 100% give you that. I think it is the best version of a not like turn-based combat system that I've seen in a Final Fantasy. I think the ones in like 13 and shit, even in 15, I think it bugs me a little bit, but in 12, it's the only one where I play it and it's like that I think this actually works and I can, like, it's fun. I do not hate it. And as far as the visual design of the game is concerned, I agree that the palette's shit. It has that whole earth tone gray thing that all the games were doing around that point in time that's very But
Call of Duty paint.
Yeah, Call of Duty paint. But I like it visually from the design aspect because it goes back to like that Final Fantasy VIII, more human proportions, more realistic, a lot more technology-driven, things like that. And so even though the palette's shitty, I really, really liked the game design-wise. My negative praise for that game, and I think it's the biggest criticism the game can have, is they went through a large portion of that game's design phase, right, with having Balthier as the main character, who... Balthier is a fucking badass character. If you haven't played it, motherfucker's a sky pirate with guns. Like, it's awesome. It's tits. And so everything with Balthier feels really well written and exciting and fun. But the problem is as they were developing it, Square was like, well, we can't sell this to people without an androgynous male lead, so we gotta kind of fix that and shoehorn a love story in. And so then you get everything with Vaughn, which absolutely is horrible. It just weighs down the story, feels really forced, and slogs on. So my issues with the game is, even though I love the world, I love the setting, I think the bosses are super cool, all the judges, that shit's so cool to me, but it's got this really uneven feeling to it because the low points just feel so slow and bogged down. I'm just amazed at how many people haven't flat out played it. Probably though because
it's an offline MMO.
Yeah, who says that it's fucking unplayable because of the battle system.
So Dubious, I gotta ask, did you like Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii?
Or on the 3DS? I actually haven't played any of those.
Okay, because to me that's like if you took World of Warcraft and made it offline. Like, to me, it's like an evolution of RPGs for JRPGs. I thought that game was fantastic, and that's kind of the direction I had wished Final Fantasy would go in.
You might like 12 then. I don't know. I saw it as a de-evolution personally because I like turn-based games. That's one major thing. I fucking need my turn-based shit. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the world didn't grab me. Like, nothing grabbed me about that. Like, I like tried to play it a few times, and I can't even make it an hour in that game without turning it off.
When you first start off with just Vaughn and I think one other person, fights are very slow and boring until you get a full party and you fill out like the whole gambit system. Yeah. That's when things get super fun. But if you go back and play the first like 8 hours of the game, fights don't fucking grab you. That's for damn sure.
That's how
Lunar. Fair though.
That's how Lunar is Silver Star Story. It's the same way.
That
so,
first
like,
8 hours
starting out
was shoehorned because they needed
I thought Lunar grabbed me quick, actually.
Yeah, I think it did too, but that might be just because I love the 2D graphics on it and the sound and the environment and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know. Final Fantasy XII is another one of those games that I think if you haven't given it a chance, it is highly worth doing, despite what fucking Old Man Dubious says. Which, my thing, and this might me just being more moderate, I think it's one of those things where either you are strict in that you like the old school turn-based combat or you're open-minded enough to try new things, because I think turn-based is significantly better, but I think Final Fantasy XII is the one example where they have a modern like combat system that it doesn't feel really shitty.
I'll probably get it for the re-release.
Yeah.
The re-release looks good. Like, it's a good
And I love the gambit system. Once it's filled out, I had a lot of fun like coming up with party formations and how people reacted and things like that. But
over 13 though?
Yeah, we can agree that 13 is absolute horrible garbage, and we can get to it.
So I also let me start off on 13. So Final Fantasy 13, I really did try to give it an open shot, like an open-minded perspective. So I went into it definitely reading all the negative praise and seeing all the negative reviews and everything. But I went into it maybe about 2 to 3 years after it had come out. I bought it on the 360, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this game a shot. So I turn it on, and I'm playing, and it wasn't necessarily the linear aspect that bugged me. I hated the characters, almost every single. I liked Lightning was okay. She was all right. And I liked the dude with the afro.
And the baby chocobo, yeah.
Baby chocobo in his head.
Yeah.
That was cool. I hated the little kid.
The little kid sucked so bad.
Oh, he was awful. I hated
Hope.
What was her name? Vanille?
She was supposed to be the main character originally. Who came up with that? I don't understand.
I hated her. She was terrible. So I really didn't make it far. I maybe played. I wanted less than 10 hours, and I gave up. I was like, no, I'm done.
Okay, no joke.
I put 30 hours into it.
Okay, like cross my heart on a Bible, your story with Final Fantasy VIII is word for word my story with Final Fantasy 13.
Okay.
Pre-ordered it, got it day one, tried playing it, gave up about, I don't know, 8-10 hours in, right after you get the first summon, and you're just walking through hallways and ice for fucking 4 hours. That's cool. I'm done. Ended up selling it, right? Start dating this girl who's kind of into RPGs. She's like, hey, I like it. You should try playing it again. Buy another copy. Exact same thing fucking happens, right? So then my most recent ex, when she, her and I started seeing each other, she was a big time video gamer, right? That's what she was super into. And she was like, no, Final Fantasy 13 is the best Final Fantasy. You need to sit down and actually give it a chance. Keeping in mind, this girl had a slight case of the not quite theirs. And so I play it, I turned off. I'm like, this is horrible. I would never buy this. I want to sell your copy. And she's like, no, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to replay it. You watch me replay it, and you'll see what this game is amazing. And I couldn't even fucking watch it, dude. I get paid to watch video games a lot of the time, and I couldn't fucking watch it. You know what I mean? Like, Final Hallway 13 to me is the epitome of how not to do a Final Fantasy. It's got terrible characters, a terrible story, terrible magic, a terrible setting, wildly linear for like the first half of the whole fucking, like the first 40 hours of the game is just a hallway. Like it's horrible. I cannot think
the battle system is just auto attacking.
It's so bad. You don't do anything.
No, it's terrible as shit. Here's the problem with the entire battle system. There's no impact for anything. When you attack someone with lightning, it's like there's no, I didn't feel, when you're playing with Final Fantasy 7, you get a fucking critical hit. Holy shit, that sounds cool. It's like,
yeah.
Teams just like, boop. And then what's every magic spell you get in the entire game? A ball that comes out of you and explodes when it hits the enemy. Every one of them with different colors. I had so many magic spells. I was like, oh, I'll cast this one. It'll be cool. Every single one of them. Let me tell you my story with Final Fantasy 13. I was the same way. I bought it day one, and I had it set up, and it was me and my wife's second apartment, and the way we had it set up is we had roommates, so all of my games and everything was in my room with me, and she would be on the bed just hanging out, and I would be playing Final Fantasy 13, and I was like, I think 15 hours in, when you get to Hope's dad's house, and these guys catch back up with you, and there's this boss. And you have to not only take off a certain amount of damage from the boss, but you have to do it like all in a couple of attacks, or you do no damage. And I played that boss for like ever. And my wife like rolled over and goes, "Why are you still playing this game?" I like turned my head to tell her all the reasons. No, I had nothing, and I was legitimately like, and I just turned it off. I've never played it since. I could not, for the life of me, think of a reason to tell her why I was still playing Final Fantasy 13. But I found people who generally don't play RPGs like 13 a lot.
That makes sense.
See, I actually had I got it day one, and I was hyped for that thing too. And then I did put a lot of time into it, but eventually I had pretty much the same thing happen. I got to a boss fight that I couldn't beat, and I just kept trying to beat it. And then eventually I was just like, you know what, fuck this. And it was one of the summons. Remember how like, and that one
was okay. A lot of people quit on the first summon because you have to out heal her, is what it is. You're not supposed to DPS her. You're supposed to heal yourself, and they just like don't really fucking tell you. Yeah. They're just like, if you survive the trial, you get the thing, and that's where 90% of the people I talk to.
I was like on like the fourth summon like battle or whatever, and yeah, something similar happened. I can't remember how you had to beat it, but like it was basically impossible, and I was like, okay, well, fuck this.
Yeah, fuck the whole game. You know what's cool though? This is another fucking stupid thing, but it had great menus. What a great menu system. Yeah. Every time you went to the status screen, it was a quick video of the character and then the black and white portrait. That was awesome. Yeah. It was a beautiful looking menu wrapped in a game that was total shit.
It was really good. It was a really good looking game, but like
visually it's very pretty.
But the character sucks.
Also God, shit ass awful fucking soundtrack.
Yeah.
Garbage.
There was nothing was memorable.
That were good, not great, but just good. The rest of it was just like twinkly wind chimes. It's fucking.
Now my stomach's upset because we're talking about 13.
There was 2 sequels for it too.
Almost 3, and the third spinoff got made into 15. Which is why I want. Did anybody play 14 besides me? Has anybody had any experience with that?
my wife did for the first launch.
Okay, because here is my official one-eye short minute-long review of Final Fantasy XIV. Launch was terrible. Realm Reborn is really good. It's pretty much just World of Warcraft. That's all it is. Gameplay is just World of Warcraft, but it feels a lot like a Final Fantasy because all of the visuals and sounds and classes and like characters and stuff are all very Final Fantasy. Like you're playing a black mage and you know what Fire Aga is going to look like and shit like that. And the job system's really cool because it's got a whole job system encoded in the game. So if you are curious about it, you could do a lot worse than play Final Fantasy. Like the gameplay is solid and it actually feels like a Final Fantasy. So 14 is not terrible. Give it a try if you want. Right. Let's talk about 15 though, because Final Fantasy 15. Let me give you my experience of playing it. Right, I heard really, really good things. I heard really, really good things from people in Multitapped, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna actually check this game out. We'll see how it is. And I played the game, right, and I'm playing it, and I'm like, this is weird, but I'm enjoying it. And so I'm playing it, and I don't really know what's going on, but I'm having a good time. And then eventually I just get bored. I don't really know what it is, but I know, Jared, you played it. Dubious, I'm pretty sure you played it. Yep. Did you play it, Mike Tendo?
No, I did not play Final Fantasy Backstreet Boys Edition. Sorry.
Okay, I quit playing at the Chocobos. When you get like into the second act of the game, right? And they're like, hey, let's go hit up the Chocobo farm. I just stopped playing because I got really fucking bored. It's not like I necessarily have anything directly negative I can say about the game. I think the cooking was kind of stupid. I also hate how the whole car thing worked. Like, if you're going to give me a car, just give me a car. Like, why the fuck is it on a track? I don't understand any of that. But the things they did right is the game was really gorgeous. I liked the art direction. It looked really clean. Yeah. And it felt to me kind of like how 9 felt, in that it felt like a love letter. And I'll admit that's just when you're in the car and you can listen to every other Final Fantasy soundtrack. But I really enjoyed that, as stupid as that sounds. Like, the driving was dumb, but going down a highway with the top down listening to the old Final Fantasies was pretty satisfying. Other than that, though, it felt weird. It didn't really feel like a Final Fantasy.
Yeah. Final Fantasy 15 was Final Fantasy 9 Reborn. I just did not get into the visual aspects. I didn't want to play as 5 black-clad modern douchebags driving around in a car.
That's my perfect demographic.
That's just, I don't know. There's this fine line for Final Fantasy for me where, like, if it's too fantasy based, like 9, I'm kind of like and if it's too modern, I'm like But if it's like got that nice mix that 7 had, where it's like steampunk, sci-fi, fantasy, it's all kind of like mixed together, like 7 and 8 were, like that's my bread and butter. But then like I'll lean more to the left with like Final Fantasy 5, Final Fantasy 4, like those types of games. I'll lean that way more. But then I'll lean the other way too with like Final Fantasy 12 or Final Fantasy 10. So I kind of go back and forth, but like the extremes I don't like hitting. So Final Fantasy 15 and 9 for me were very similar, just on completely different spectrums. Visually, at least.
Yeah, 15, I have not beat 15, but I probably have a good 40-ish hours into it. I think it's a good game. I wouldn't say this, but if someone argued with me and said it's not a good Final Fantasy game, I wouldn't have a lot to come back with. What it is Squaresoft's first real attempt at an open world, and as far as first attempts at open worlds go, it's a really good first attempt. What they didn't realize is you have to populate that open world with a lot of shit.
It feels empty.
They have a good game's worth of Final Fantasy content in this open world, but because it's spread out in this open world, there's a lot of, there's really cool shit you can do and a lot of space in between those cool things. But sometimes that game, what's really cool about it is it has that open world sense of randomness to it. Like I was coming out of one area, and then I walked through this area that almost looked like a crater, and then there was a hole, and I was like, wow, I guess I'll just walk. Gigantic, huge boss I was not supposed to be anywhere near at that level, and I love that. I actually do like the look of the game. Ever since it was going to be Versus 13, I really liked that realistic look, and I really got into a lot of the stuff that came out before it. The movie
Kingslave?
Kingslave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kingslave, yeah.
That was a really cool movie with some cool characters, and it was really good looking. That's the problem with 15, though, is like if you didn't watch that movie, a lot of 15,
No idea what was going on.
with at least the first 8 hours, you'll be like, well, I feel like I should have met the king at some point. And like when the king dies, and then Noxus is just like, well, that ruins my day. Like, you would have had to have seen the backstory. And then it would help if you watched the OVA, so you can get a backstory to all the characters too, which is not the way you're supposed to do a narrative. You're supposed to weave that into the game with exposition. And
7 got it right in that aspect.
7 did get it right.
Because they got the game, and then the movie, and then the other games, and all of that was kind of, like...
secondary.
Right.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 15, you have to do your required reading first. Once you do, and if you get into that look of a realistic kind of... I love the Stalker game, so I like going around a place that's quasi, like, recognizable, but super alien at the same time. And with 15, that's what you'll get. You'll be driving down the road, and you'll see a giant meteor crater with, like, emerald glass coming out of it that glows at night. And when you're driving, sometimes it's probably one of just the most beautiful open world games you'll...
It really is. It's very pretty.
Incredibly looking. And I really like the combat can be good because it's more like gameplay, like reaction based than it is like level based. It can get a little cheap sometimes, and sometimes you'll die and you have no fucking idea how you did it. And one quick piece of advice: don't ever give your party members magic, because all magic is area of effect, and it hits everyone, and they will fucking use it no matter what.
Well, that and the whole magic system in that game, like I didn't end up using it because I didn't want to farm for shit. Like there's no fucking point. I'm just gonna hit stuff with a stick and have a good time.
No, magic is garbage in that game. I haven't used a magic spell in an hour. There's a couple magic spells you can craft that like double and triple EXP. Those would be the only ones you use throughout the entire game.
But yeah, you would be wrong to call Final Fantasy 15 a bad game, but I also feel like you'd be wrong to call it a Final Fantasy. I don't know. It's got a lot going for it. I also think even though the game advises you not to, and it's designed for you not to, I think that game really shines at night when you're running around and just like huge, terrifying shits popping out of fucking nowhere, and just like the combat's really hard and fast. Like,
if you have a ground sound system too, when you're driving by and the demons come out of the ground, oh, it's chilling. You can hear it right behind you, and as you like get further away, it kind of starts to quiet down. Surround sound decoding and that whole game is incredible.
But yeah, it feels like it's sort of become the poster boy for what they want a modern Final Fantasy to be. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the franchise going forward. That being said, though, we are already way past our schedule, and I do really want to try to get out the quiz real fast. So if anybody watching or wondering is why we didn't touch like the tactics or any of those, we're just covering the mainline Final Fantasies. We'll do spin-offs and things like that. I would like to in an entire separate episode, because I think games like tactics and stuff do deserve an entire episode dedicated to them. So we will be looking to do that in the future. But tonight and right now, we're going to be doing a quiz. And as always, the winner gets bragging rights and a stupid little title. And tonight's title, the winner shall be named the official TWOC. And for those of you who don't know, TWOG is a little in-joke we have in Multitapped for each other, where it stands for Tired White Old Guy. And the winner tonight will be the Tired White Old Chocobo, so the TWOC. So that is the prize that is up for grabs. I think this quiz will hit somewhere in the middle in terms of difficulty. I think the softballs are extra soft, and I think some of the hard balls. I think there are 2 questions here that I have absolutely no idea how you would know any of that. So we'll see how it goes. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So, question number 1. Oh, and as always, if you know the answer, just wait, give other people a chance, try to softball it. Don't want everyone getting points. Question number 1. Before it was decided to be called Final Fantasy, Which of the following answers was a working title for the original game? Is it A, Magic Fantasy, B, Ultimate Fantasy, C, Fighting Fantasy, or D, Warcraft? Also, should you have not heard of these before, there's always one blatantly wrong answer normally in D. So, pretty easy to tell on that one.
Okay.
You'll notice the only reoccurring thing is the word fantasy between all of these. So,
I'm
C for me.
Yeah, I was
You're
gonna say
thinking
C.
Fighting fantasy. What are you thinking, Dubs?
C.
God damn, it, this.
This is always Dub's strategy, and as typical, when everybody picks the same answer, the risk is that everybody loses the points. But that's not what's going on here. Everybody gets a point. It was, in fact, Fighting Fantasy, which I would like to see. Dude, could you imagine a Street Fighter beat 'em up called Fighting Fantasy? Hell yeah, dude! I play the shit out of it.
Wow, there was a amateur like 3D animator who took Final Fantasy characters and made them fight, and as an homage, he called it Fighting Fantasy.
Mhm.
Also, quick aside, remember in the beginning episode where you're talking about they called it Final Fantasy because it was like their last ditch effort? Like that's not true. It was just the next F word they could say in English.
It's the rumor. It's not the official thing. I don't
Right.
think I said it was the fact. I think they said that was the why people thought it. But question number 2. Final Fantasy. See, this is, for the record, this is one of the ones that I have no idea if you guys are going to be able to get. Final Fantasy has become so popular that in the 2004 Summer Olympics, the United States synchronized swimming duo team performed a routine featuring music from which game? Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, or Banjo-Kazooie?
Hey.
I'm gonna
And this
say-
is a thing that actually happened. You can Google this.
I'm gonna go with 8.
You're thinking 8?
I'm gonna go with 7.
You're thinking 7? What are you thinking, Dubes?
7.
You're thinking 7? Well, funnily enough, it actually was Final Fantasy VIII. So the point goes to Avalanche Jared, who saw that coming. And I recommend looking up the routine because it's crazy to see an Olympic synchronized swimming set to Final Fantasy VIII. But they took 3rd place. They did get the bronze for the performance. So that is 1 point to Mr. Jared. Congratulations. Question number 3. Sephiroth is one of the franchise's most famous villains, right? And his theme, One Winged Angel, is just as popular. Which of the following songs did Nobu Uematsu credit for inspiring the track? Is it A, Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, C, Crossroads by Cream, C, Cliffs of Dover by Eric Johnson, or D, Fireworks by Katy Perry?
A.
Yeah, I'm gonna say A. It has the same kind of flow to it.
What are you thinking, Dubs?
It's definitely not Cliffs of Dover. I can tell you that much.
You know, Dubious, you look like a guy
Yo,
who
it's
would,
fireworks.
Dubious
Let's be
looks
honest.
like a dude who would listen to Cream while like candles are lit and he has it on 8.
Maybe like drip some of the candle on your hand.
Yeah.
What was it? So it's Cream or Jimi Hendrix?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess A.
So that's everybody going with Hendrix?
Yeah.
Luckily enough, I think that's a more well-known fact that he was credited saying that. It was, in fact, Purple Rain. You can kind of hear it in it, but, all the music around there, let's be honest, it's all 70s. We don't know what we're talking about here. There's a lot of weed involved in that fucking music making. But it was, in fact, Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. So that is a point to everybody. This is a surprisingly close race so far. Moving on to question 4. Final Fantasy IV was the first game to feature the iconic active time battle feature. What did Hiroyuki Ito get the initial concept from? Was it A, horse racing, B, yacht racing, C, Formula One racing, or D, baby racing?
You know how hard I want to go with baby racing?
Let's be honest, we all want to go with baby racing. That would be a hell of a sport. Just like a little rattle on one of those tracks that they use for the Greyhounds.
I'm going to have to go with A.
I'm gonna say
Horse
C.
racing? Formula One for you? What are you thinking, Dubs?
Formula One.
Formula One? Well, see, this I found to be a really interesting question because horse racing's wildly popular in Japan, right?
That's
but it's
why I went with it.
totally Formula One racing.
What?
Yeah, I'm not even kidding. The speed of it is what inspired him to come up with a system that had things going at a different pace. So at this point in time, we're actually completely tied up with everybody having 3 points.
I thought I was so fucking smart. I was in Tokyo, like, oh, look at all the horse racing, and my
Like,
mind
it's
was
huge.
back to that, like,
It is huge. Yeah.
Like they fucking love horse racing. I thought it was surprising too. But
Okay.
moving on to question 5. The Final Fantasy franchise has a lot of reoccurring characters across the games. However, which of the following is the only character to be the same one featured in every game they appear in? Is it A, Gilgamesh, B, Sid, D, Bahamut, or D, Danny DeVito? And you knew he was going to be there somewhere on the quiz. There is yet to be one without him. I would love to see the Danny DeVito summon. I imagine a demi effect or something like that. He just crawls naked out of a leather couch all sweaty and coughs on him or something. But is it A, Gilgamesh, B, Sid, or D, C, Bahamut? Blech, too many letters. Terrible at this.
C?
Yeah, I'm gonna say C.
C.
So that's 3 for Bahamut. Well, great thing about bandwagons, you guys are actually wrong on this one. It is, in fact, Gilgamesh. I believe it's, I would have to look it up again. Don't crucify me, chat and people. It's either 5 or 6 that he's in, where he gets banished, or he doesn't get banished, but he goes into another dimension called the Rift to find weapons from alternate universes. And so in every other game where he appears in it, it actually is that same Gilgamesh from the early Final Fantasy going to the different games to become more powerful.
Yes, because he was in fucking Final Fantasy 0. Fuck. All right, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's a cool little one, though, right?
Yeah.
Question number 6. In Final Fantasy VIII, there's an Easter egg hidden in the parade cutscene. If you pay attention, what can a group of dancers be seen performing? Is it A, the Hammer Dance, B, Thriller, C, the Macarena, or D, the Whip and Nene?
It's gotta be C.
Let's see.
I'm gonna say C, just because time-wise,
Yeah, it lines
the
up.
game came out right around the time when the Macarena was huge.
Yeah.
See, this reminds me of, I want to say it was the fast food quiz where everyone was bandwagoning, because statistically, man, you guys just do worse when it happens. It's actually Thriller, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really?
Huh.
Yeah, which I thought that was going to be a gimme just because that's like the one dance Easter egg featured in everything ever. Oh, hey, they're doing the Thriller dance. But yeah, it was in fact the Thriller dance if you pay attention, which also, for the record, as much as I rag on 8, is a really good cutscene. That whole section of the game with the parade is really fucking good. Question number 7. One of the most exciting set pieces in Final Fantasy VII is the Gold Saucer Amusement Park. If you pay attention, there's an Easter egg in the background that pays tribute to what anime? Is it A, Neon Genesis Evangelion, B, Escaflowne, C, Robotech, or D, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends?
Hey.
You know, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends was a great anime.
The classic, let's be honest here. Okay, so Mike, you're thinking
say A.
Evangelion?
Yeah.
I'm thinking Robotech.
You're thinking Robotech? What about you, Dubious?
Escaflowne.
Escaflowne. See, I love you, Dupes, for actually mixing up. That's great. That's the first split we've had so far. And the point goes to Mr. Mike Tendo, as a matter of fact. If you look in the background, you can see Asuka Langley's D-type Ava armor. So that
I don't know
is
where I read that, but I definitely read that somewhere.
Damn it.
nice, dude. Tendo with the sneak. Very well played. Moving on to question 8. Many people don't know this, but if you press the A and B buttons together 55 times once you get the ship in the original Final Fantasy, you'll unlock a hidden minigame that pays out what is the reward? Is it A, a tent, B, a heal, C, 100 gold, or D, a personal sense of accomplishment?
A.
10.
I'm gonna go with 100 gold.
Well, I will admit there is some correct answers, and the correct answers is actually singular and goes to Jared because it is 100 gold. For those of you who don't know, too, the mini game is one of those slide puzzles with the numbers where you have to get them in order. You know what I mean? And every time you do it correctly, 100 gil straight in your pocket,
Nice.
Easy peasy. And I also believe that that's where they started the whole mini games in the Final Fantasy thing because that kind of became another reoccurring theme that you see a lot. Question number 9. One of the most famous reoccurring Final Fantasy music tracks is Prelude, which is known for having a very famous composition time. How long did it take to be made? Is it A, 1 minute, B, 5 minutes, C, 10 minutes, or D, 1,000 years?
1
You
minute,
say-
5 minute, and 10 minutes?
Yep. How long did the famous Final Fantasy Prelude take to get made? Jared, you were saying 5 minutes? You're split in the middle?
You mean take to get created?
Yeah. Like, how long
Okay.
did it take for him to compose it originally?
Okay.
1 minute.
Jubes, you're thinking 1 minute. You're going short. Jared, you're going the middle. What are you thinking, Mike?
I'm going to say B.
You're thinking 5?
I'm thinking
Well,
5.
that would be points to Mr. Mike and Mr. Jared. It was famously completed in just 5 minutes. That's one of the ones that I figured was kind of a softball. That's a pretty well-known fact. But let's go ahead and move on to question number 10. We do have a tie here, so I would ask that you boys play for the tie. You don't have to by any means. We've had ties before. That's not a problem by any means. You can both be old white chocobos. I'm okay with it. But question number 10. Another hit Hironobu Sakaguchi made is Nakama Miho no Tokimeki High School, a Japanese dating sim, which he co-produced with what other famous game creator? Is it A, Yoshio Sakamoto from Metroid, B, Shigeru Miyamoto from fucking everything, C, Toru Osawa from Kid Icarus, or D, Cliff Bleszinski from Unreal Tournament?
What were the first three? Obviously, it's not the
Yoshio Sakamoto from Metroid, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Toru Osawa from Kid Icarus.
I'm gonna go with Toru Osawa.
Yeah, it's C.
So that's 2 for C. What are you thinking, Dubious?
Well, I'm already out. Since they're tied.
But but you still have a horse in this race. I mean, you could still, pad that resume a little bit.
All right, C.
See, well, we do have a tie, but actually, it's because you all got it wrong. It was, in fact, Yoshio Sakamoto from Metroid.
Really?
I was thinking that was one you might know, Mike, which is why I was worried that it might be a little slighted because you're all up in that Samus. But yeah, they together made a very popular dating sim for the NES. Cool little tidbit for you.
Interesting.
So after all said and done, we have a tie with 5 points between Mr. Avalanche Jared and Mr. Mike Tendo. Well played, boys. A little golf clap going on. All that fireworks. I am actually surprised at how difficult that ended up being. I was expecting it to be a little bit easier, but I'm happy with the 5. That's pretty cool. That's right down the middle. That's where I like the quizzes to be. But this is normally the point where I like to give all of my guests an opportunity to plug their social media, any recent or upcoming projects. So why don't we go ahead and start with you, Mr. Tendo?
Well, actually, I had one more thing that I wanted to, because I was going through the document that you prepared for this, and as far as topics go, and I thought one really good one to end on would be favorite husbandos / waifus.
Oh yeah, favorite husbando waifu
of the Final Fantasy universe.
We can squeeze it in. That is a good question, and I am a little bit curious. Who is everybody's favorite waifu or husbando? Because I'll go ahead and I'll go out there. Mine will be Red 13 because I'm another kid. No, I'm fucking kidding. No, that's horrible. I'm not one of those. Please, guys, I'm making a joke. But I would have to say, ooh, that's tricky. Maybe Armrant from 9, but just because he's so damn handsome. He seems like the kind of guy who could really just squeeze you and put in some love. You know what I mean?
You would.
But what about you guys? I'm waiting to hear 3 Tifas. So.
Fuck. I gotta go with Celeste.
That's mine too, actually.
Yeah.
Really?
She's wearing a one-piece bathing suit, in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, too. And really good design. I mean, all the art for the game's absolutely gorgeous. But 2 for Celeste, what are you thinking, Mike?
Oh, come on. You know I'm all about that Tifa.
Hell yeah, I knew there'd at least one.
Yeah. Tifa was the first like female character that felt real to me. Aside from Samus and
real.
And Marley from Chrono Trigger. Like I felt like they were real, like personalities, and they had depth to them. So yeah, I would say Tifa was definitely big on my list. If I had to vote husbandos, I don't know. I guess Squall. Because I don't know if I was
dominate that.
Yeah, if I was the girl in the relationship with Squall, I would feel like Squall would just treat me like garbage, and that's kind of, I don't know. It's not what I look for, definitely not. But I feel like I feel like Squall would definitely be my husband.
Oh my god, that is some.
Knock yourself out of that halfway.
20s. That is the 2017 quote. There is. I think you treat me really badly, but
but I want to be with you, Squall.
I think it's funny that you mentioned Tifa just as one more little story before we do the plugs and everything, because I actually got in an incredibly heated argument with my friend's mother one time over Tifa, because her point was that Tifa is the perfect example of an over-sexualized garbage character, and my argument was the exact opposite, in that even though Tifa has gigantic titties, which she does, and I know this might be hard to believe, but there are people in the world who have gigantic titties. That's a thing that exists. She has like a really good character. She has the whole like she fucking raising a kid and all that shit. Like everything about Tifa felt really real, kind of like you said. She felt like an actual fucking person. Like I've always loved the way Tifa's written. She's a badass bitch, dude. She doesn't even get weapons. She punches people. You figure like you're looking at typical. Yeah, you're looking at like monk class characters, and they're always generally like big, beefy motherfuckers. Like I mentioned, Armrat, classic monk, huge motherfucker. Yeah. Here comes Tifa, and she's just gonna kick the shit out of you. I absolutely loved her. Spunky, intelligent, charismatic. I think she's probably one of the better female Final Fantasy characters they've ever put in a game. In all seriousness, I think Tifa's the shit. I really.
It is awesome.
So. With that being said, and now everybody knowing who's on our assorted body pillows, Mr. Mike Tendo, where can people find you?
You can check me out on youtube.com/Dongold. It's way easier if you just type in "Dude, you haven't played this game," which is the name of my show. I do video game review show where it's like skits, partially skits, and I guess the big thing I like to say is it's edutainment at its finest. Video game edutainment. So I also do a video game podcast, music podcast called Pixel Tunes Radio with my co-host Ed. And you can check that out at pixeltunesradio.com or check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/pixeltunesradio, or check us out on Twitter at pixeltunesradio. You can find us on iTunes. We're all over the place, but that is pretty much where you could find me.
And do check out his shit. I know that this wasn't anything you mentioned, but you just released like a cartridge cleaning videos. I know you just started that series, but I think it's really cool to kind of help people out who are getting into collecting and things like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even I learned shit like that. So
yeah, Noob Repair is another series that I do on that channel where it's like easy non-soldering modifications and maintenance for video games. So yeah, I do that too. And then a new series that I just started, which is called Gaming Linguistics, which we were talking about a little bit earlier, where it's like pronunciations of different things. So for the people that actually stuck it out, who watched this whole thing, I can give you an exclusive that the next episode is going to be on Zebus, or Metroid for Zebes versus Zebus.
I've always heard Zebus. I don't think I've ever heard Zebes.
So, and I go into detail as far as like what I believe the official pronunciation is. So, I go through like YouTube clips and YouTube videos and background information. I scour the internet to try to find information on how to actually pronounce this stuff. So.
Oh, okay.
It's funny. I even made this comment on your first video, which was on Chrono versus Chrono. Yep. Until I had saw that video, I had never heard a single person pronounce it Chrono. Yeah, literally had never encountered that. So all the stuff you're putting out right now is super cool. Definitely check it out if you haven't. What about you, Mr. Jared?
Avalanche Jared on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube, Avalanche Reviews, and I'm working on something with the great Jimmy Hoppa of Import Gaming Win and Viridian Flashbacks, Dolly Popka, and Game Dave. You guys probably know. We're doing the Summer of Suikoden, and we're all releasing Suikoden reviews of the different games in the series. I'm doing Suikoden 4, and I'm going to be touching on one of the games that never came to the U.S. That'll be super cool, and that should be out, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, this Friday. So the Summer of Suikoden will kick off then. And I think that's it. Yeah, come down to the YouTube, hang out.
Cool.
Yeah, gotta love anything Jimmy Hoppa does. All those group projects always turn out really, really well. Everybody involved has a ton of fucking talent. And then also, this is the only time you haven't plugged them, so I want to give you a little shout out on that too. Your channel has some great talking points. I'll be honest, you said that your most recent one was going to be a doozy, and I don't really think it was. But I do like those videos just because I think there are a lot of people who aren't willing to touch on potentially confrontational subjects in video games. So if you like RPGs, if you like bald muscly guys, definitely go check out Avalanche Jared. What about you, Dubious?
Well, my name is Dubious Gaming, and I'm here to say fuck Final Fantasy 12 the American way.
Jesus. Kill me now.
You can find me on YouTube, Dubious Gaming Online, Twitter, Dubious Gaming, Twitch, Dubious Gaming,
Patreon.
Yeah, don't forget to give me money on Patreon.
That is my favorite multi-tap meme, is Nest Chronology is a Patreon supported program.
Oh, I actually just started a Patreon too, fairly recently. It's just Dongled, which is the name of my channel, so patreon.com/Dongled. So, yeah.
How much do I have to pay you to play Dota?
$1 million.
Damn, that's a lot higher than Luke. Luke said 10, and he'd even edit the own video. Shit. But no, I'm excited to see some of the stuff you have coming out and in the works, Dubious. It's going to be nice. I'm excited for it. As far as myself is concerned, if anybody needs to get in touch with me, the easiest way to do that is on Twitter. My handle is @NA1I for North American, because that's where I live, and 1I is surprisingly common. It turns out I'm not the only person who played Warhammer 40K, so there you go. But @NA1I is the easiest way to get in touch with me. Every week we do this podcast, though we might be moving time back a little bit just because it might be more convenient and would be nice if we can get away with it. But you can always check us Tuesdays. Next week's episode will be just me and Dubious, and we will be covering gaming news as well as fielding questions from the audience and taking recommendations for next season's episodes, because we will be coming up with that very soon. And then finally, after that, we will have our season finale, which is going to be absolutely huge, and it's a Ninja Turtles episode where we'll be discussing Ninja Turtles, the games, the movies, the comics, everything about those turtles in a half shell. So definitely stop by and check that one up. It is completely filled, a lot of good talent coming for that, so check those out. As always, and in particular with tonight, I do want to thank my guests. Final Fantasy is a huge subject, even just tackling the mainline games, and I know this episode ran quite a bit over what we traditionally aim to do. So I just wanted to thank you guys for being here. The input is always appreciated. The show isn't as fun without you guys, as well as isn't nearly as informative. So thank you truly and genuinely for being here. Thank you to the audience who participated in chat and all that jazz. Thank you to anybody who's catching us on YouTube or anything like that. And for my guests and myself, we will see you guys next week.